Okay, so last time you were just about to leave Konami, and I did have a couple of follow-up questions before we move on from there. Now, you talked about learning the ins and outs of licensing deals there. And obviously, you've worked with licensed properties later in your career as well. So I wanted to get a little bit more detail about what licensing a media property, like, for example, The Simpsons or something like that, was like in the late 80s, early 90s.
Well, probably a lot less formal than it is today, right? So I think that NFL was pretty buttoned up back then. People like Warner Brothers were pretty buttoned up, but a lot of the newer properties were not, quite as formalized as they would become, professionalized as they would become later. It was still the same process, though. You had to, propose something. They had to like it. You had to have the structure of a deal to where you could actually make it particularly on the platforms we had then, because, they go, oh no, we need this yellow. Well, in fact, this system won't do that yellow. It can't be done. It's not physically possible. We'd love to do it, but we can't. So, the harder part in structuring the deals was really to adapt to the technology. Is my recollection, right? That's where we kind of got into more friction points with the licensors than anything else. Occasionally, it would be, back then we weren't having to extend the universes as much to make games work because the games were simpler. But as time went on, what happens in licensing is you go, well, that's great, but now I need like 10 times the amount of canon that you have. Can we start making canon for you? So that's what happens, more in the modern day, right? Particularly when we're making pretty large universe-based games and stuff. We want to show them what's outside that door, what's over that next hill that they never saw when they were doing the original property.
Gotcha. And there's a very specific question about one license I thought you might be able to clarify. The Simpsons license, Konami had the rights to the arcade game.
Yes.
That arcade game gets ported to DOS and the Commodore 64.
Yes.
And to no other systems. And Acclaim had the license for the NES and Sega Genesis and so forth. What happened there?
I don't know.
How did that?
I don't know. That was before my time or outside of my scope.
Gotcha.
I wasn't the licensing person, right? I just learned a lot from the licensing person there.
Okay.
I just sit down and talk, every week, and she told me a lot about how the world worked in her world.
Gotcha. Okay. I just thought if I had you here, I might as well ask the question. Okay. Now, you also said that you were working, since you were dealing with the PC side of things or computer side of things, you were working with some European studios for development. What was that relationship like? I know you did, trying to remember the name of the company now off the top of my head. It was a Eastern European studio, I think Novo Trade or something along those lines. How did that kind of relationship, did they approach Konami? Did you approach them? Did they already have an existing deal with Konami when you arrived?
Yeah, almost all those were existing deals. I don't think, I'm trying to think if I actually started a new European deal while I was there. And I don't think so. Most of it was picking up deals that were in progress and trying to make them work, right? And trying to make sure that those guys got the games out the door, that we got the games out the door, that we sold them to the best of our ability at the time.
Oh, okay. Now, was the U.S. seed of Konami at all involved with European distribution, or was that completely separate?
No, it was really pretty separate.
Okay.
Right. So they sometimes they'd pick up something and we get some rights from it and vice versa.
Gotcha. And my final follow-up question about the Konami stuff, there was an attempt late 80s to port, or 1990, I think maybe it was, to start porting NES Konami titles to home computers. Castlevania, Metal Gear Solid, Blades of Steel, and so forth. And it seemed to have ended fairly abruptly. Did this cover any of the period of time you were there? And was there any discussion of bringing Konami's then current titles over to PC platforms?
Not really. I think I started there in 91 or 92. And at that point, we had a few, like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and games that had been doing okay. I think the challenge with all big companies is, if you're doing something really big, it's really hard to do something small. Mm-hmm. And PC was small relative to console for them.
Gotcha.
So, oh, great, hey, we can sell millions of this one, but over on PC here, we can sell hundreds of thousands. Not as interesting, right?
Gotcha.
It's still a bunch of work. It is a bunch of work. They're all a bunch of work, right? So it's, I don't think that they were that, I think their forays into that taught them that was not a super lucrative thing to do. It wasn't cheap that cheap enough to get them made to make them super profitable when they sold lower volumes.
Gotcha.
Okay. They were risky, right? Because again, the market wasn't super accepting of a lot of those kind of ports.
Very true. Very true. Well, also some of them felt a little thrown together at times, but.
Oh yeah, they were craptastical. Yeah, they were.
As somebody who still owns an Amiga copy of Super Contra, I can attest to that. Oh my Lord. Okay. So, sorry. Those were all my follow-ups for Konami. Let's pick up the story where we left off last time. You got an offer, I believe, from somebody else?
Yeah, from GameTech down in Florida. So, the lure of going to Florida in the winter was awesome. And it was a crazy gig, right? It was hey, we're going to go public in a year. We need to ramp things up tremendously, and so it was a go thing, right? It was great. Every day was a great day for learning stuff. When I walked in the door, they had maybe 20, 25 things in progress. When I walked out the door, we had like 110 things in progress. So,
oh Jesus!
So yeah, we were constantly, we had a little bit of internal stuff going on. We were talking to every developer we could find about, did they have something that we could publish for them? We had some licenses. That company had a lot of licenses that we needed to get done. So we were trying to find good developers to do those licenses. So yeah, it was kind of all of everything, and it was more integrated with the European side than certainly than Konami was. Right, we had a consistent dialogue with the European side of the business versus the Konami where we had kind of an intermittent communication with the European side of the business.
Gotcha. Now, what years were you at GameTech?
I want to say 92, 90. No, it would be 92, 93 in that range. Okay. So right the year before they went public, and after they went public, they kind of flamed out pretty quickly after that. So, but it was a great group of people. For the most part, the guy, the president, not the owner, right, but the president of the company, Bruce Lowry, was pretty cool. He was my kind of manager. He said, "Okay, here's what I need you to do. Go do it. I don't want to hear about it, and I want to hear the results." So I like the loose reins and being able to kind of run, and bring your bear pelt hunting, right? You're bringing home bear pelts all the time. That's what it was. It was like it was a lot of work, but and we had a small internal team of producers to publish, to watch all those games. I found out later what I was doing was crazy because I basically had internal guys, running, 4 or 5 original games and, probably 20 SKUs, under each producer simultaneously. So they were working their butts off, and so was I, trying to, get a lot of stuff going. And again, it was on all platforms. We did all the platforms. We did the handhelds. We did the full consoles, and we did the PC stuff on multiple, Amiga, ST, everything at the time. So, We had games on 7 platforms.
That's insane.
Yeah, well, it seemed insane. We didn't know it was insane. We just were doing it.
So, your role there was as producer, or
I was a VP of production. I basically ran all the development and production for the company, and and then there was a marketing group, that took care of the marketing and sales, and an administrative group doing stuff, and so the kind of the quality assurance people and the everybody involved in development, whether internal or external, all reported up to me.
Gotcha. Now, GameTech, like you said, covered such a wide array of platforms. I mean,
they didn't really. I mean, they had the game show theme, but they didn't really have, a theme to a lot of the games that they published beyond the game shows. And they covered every platform that was available to sell to. We even were doing deals with, like people doing the manufactured games, handheld games that were manufactured, not like you published to, but where it was all intrinsic to Tiger guys, I think they were at the time.
Yeah. Oh, geez. And so I'm thinking games like, for example, Brutal Paws of Fury and stuff.
That was an internal game, yeah.
Yeah. Actually, once had a conversation with, I believe, the lead designer or programmer of the game. He had done the original port of Street Fighter II to the Amiga, and that game was based off of that, the engine he built for that game and stuff like that. But so now, from a business standpoint, how are you guys deciding which SKUs, which platforms to develop for? Is there a strategy to it? Is it just this team can do this, or what's?
Well, sure. I mean, we're looking at what kind of sell through you're going to what are the average titles selling through at? Can you build it for less than you're going to sell it? Do you think? But in the end, the game business is a portfolio business. You make a bunch of bets, and a bunch of them, it's almost like a venture capital business, right? You're going to make a bunch of bets. Most of them are going to go bust. They are going to do crap. And then a few of them are going to do really well. So you're using your best judgment to go, okay, we know that there's a market for this kind of thing because we see other games in this particular segment doing well. Can this game compete with those games? Is this game surprising and, delightful next to those games? Let's go ahead and do those games, right? If we see a game like that, we wanted to do it. A game that would stand out, a game that would, had a personality and would actually get, some market traction.
Now, how important was it important for you guys, or was it part of the strategy to have all of the ports of a game released simultaneously? Was it a strategy of having a lead platform and the ports following, or what was the thought process there?
It's very dependent on the game. So a game that's super high risk, you probably put it out on one platform and see how it does before you do the follow-ons. For the licensed games, where you're going to do some marketing and you want the benefit, you're going to want them as close as you can get together. But when back in those days, right, you're doing Sega and you're doing Nintendo at a minimum, right? We messed around with 3DO a little bit and other stuff, but Sega and Nintendo, you can't line them up to do stuff on your schedule. You're doing stuff on their schedule. So it's very difficult to kind of get the production to go out all at the same time. But we did the best we could, particularly when we were doing a licensed property where we knew, we wanted the benefit of what advertising we were doing.
Gotcha. Now, at this point in time, early to mid 90s, how focused, especially with a license title like Jeopardy or something, how dependent were you on Christmas sales? Had the market expanded enough that you could still distribute releases throughout the year, or was it still primarily a Christmas business?
Oh, no. We were releasing every month. In fact, our pipeline was really because you have a certain number of people, right, who can do the work. And those people can only do so many things at a time, which meant, and we were doing stuff. We were releasing things every month. And we had to. We couldn't have saved them all and done them all in one fell swoop because we literally couldn't have managed that. It would have been unmanageable to do it. Yeah, you want your biggest titles to hit during the biggest season, of course. But we were in the publish. The kind of our thing was how are we going to ramp from publishing 2 or 3 games a month up to 6 or 7 games a month.
Wow, yeah.
Titles, not SKUs, right? But titles.
Oh, wow. Okay. And that's immense. Now, were you also involved with the sale of the goods to retail outlets at that point, or
not much at GameTech? I mean, I spent a good amount of time with the sales guys because I had some simpatico for their difficulty since I just had done that at Konami. And they were a key part of the decision-making process. Like, what titles do we do? I needed sales to buy into the titles we were going to do. I needed marketing to buy into the titles we were going to do. I needed exec management to buy into the titles we were going to do. So quite often we'd be presenting, hey, we're presenting, here's like 10 things that we've come across that look pretty interesting, and we'd pick 2 or 3 of them.
Gotcha. Now,
consensus.
And when you say you pick them, were you guys how much of the development was being led through basically you guys developing an idea and then finding a developer to realize the game, and how much of it was developers bringing ideas to you?
Probably 80-20. So 80% of it was internally sourced, either licensed or like Brutal Paws of Fury was an internal idea. Before that, Humans, was an internal idea. But and then we'd see a lot of outside stuff, and we'd pick up a little bit of that stuff to go with our, with our portfolio of things that we were building on our own.
Okay, cool. And the teams how big were the differences in royalty rates and so forth between ideas that were developed internally and ideas that were brought in, if at all?
Well, internally there weren't really royalties, so you're getting paid to make a game. You're not getting any royalties. You only get royalties if you're taking risk on the outside.
Oh, okay.
And, the royalty rates at that time were in the kind of 12 to 17, 18% rate for kind of an adjusted gross price.
Cool.
So if you were selling on a console, they're subtracting out all the cost of making the cartridge, and then you get a percent of what's left over. And sometimes the marketing got dumped in there too before you got a percent. So,
gotcha.
The world was not set up to make developers rich. I promise you.
No, I've heard plenty of stories from people telling me that no, it did not make them rich. So yes, I believe that. Okay, so you're at GameTech for about 2 years. And was it because they started to phase out or fizzle out after going public, or why do you end up leaving?
No, we actually didn't. I didn't make it to the public offering. So, we were doing the road show for going public, which is going out and talking to the institutional investors. And the owner of the company literally came to me and said, "Hey, I want you to say this, but by the way, we're not actually doing that. We're going to lie to our potential investors to do this stuff, because we want their money. But here's what I'm really going to do with the money." I don't know why he told me this. He could have just lied to me, and I would have been fine. But he told me what he planned to do, and I thought about it for a bit, and I go, I just can't do that. I can't put my credibility on the line with major investors. Now that I know this, right, I can't do it. So I left the company on my own. I left. I just said I can't work here, right? I can't help you because I can't go out and represent the company when I need to be representing the company on this roadshow. So I can't do that ethically. So I got to go.
Yeah. And did you already have something else lined up at that point, or no?
Nope. So in fact, after
would you like to expand on what he intended to use the money for, or is that a bridge too far? I'll cut it out if necessary.
No, I mean it's just he wanted to represent one thing, but he actually planned to do something else, and then it just didn't sit right with me.
Gotcha.
I have I don't know why, but it didn't sit right with me, and I didn't want to be part of that.
I can understand. I can understand. Ethics means something. So where do you end up after GameTech then?
Well, we were living in Florida there, right? And after I left GameTech, I said, I know a lot about how to publish games now. I know a fair amount, and I should be doing that. There were still a lot of upstart game companies that were able to, grow and get and do some cool stuff. And so I put together a plan, put together my first business plan, which was second business plan because we did one back for applied computing and digital illusions. But I put together a business plan, and I said, I've got a little bit of money, and maybe I can raise some money. And I did go raise a little bit of money. And when I say a little bit, it's a few $100,000 back then, which I guess was a lot of money then, but not enough to do what I was doing, of course. But that never stopped me. And I got the rights back to Harpoon to publish Harpoon. So I updated Harpoon and published it. And I had some other stuff that we were working on to publish too. I picked up a couple of third-party, people, smaller developers I knew who needed a publisher, picked up their stuff and started publishing things. People that I met, in my previous jobs, mostly.
Now, just for our listeners' sake, what is the role of a publisher at that point? What is the service you're bringing to the developer's product?
Well, at that point, it was, mostly I'm going to help you get shelf space, mostly. Sometimes it was also funding some of the development, but you're definitely funding the packaging. You're going to have to make all the both design and make all the packaging. You're going to have to go out and actually sell it to the distributors and the retailers to make it work. And and I, felt pretty confident that I could do that because I've been involved in a lot of that in my most recent jobs. So, even back at Konami and at GameTech, I was involved in the packaging design and the packaging build out stuff because, everything had to kind of come together at the right point to ship things. It wasn't my direct job, but I certainly was heavily involved in it. So, I picked up a couple of products, but Harpoon was the key product. Harpoon was the one that mattered the most because it was a well-known name. Nobody was publishing it right then. The rights had reverted back to the property holder, and so I could pick it up and publish it. And we did that. We picked it up, we updated the product, for a few months, and then started publishing it. And we sold a fair amount of product. So in our first year, I want to say that's 1993, maybe. We sold almost $1 million of product. And we get to the end of the year, right? And hallelujah, it's looking good. And one of my main distributors came back to me and said, where's your next product? Well, our next product's not coming for a few months, right? We're working on it, but it's not here. Well, we're not going to pay you. We're just not going to pay you. So, sue us if you want to, but we're not going to pay you. And of course, at this point, we've sold all the, we spent all the money, we've sold all the stuff, and we have no money. And they're going, like, pound sand, we're not going to give you the money. So, that kind of basically put us out of business, right? We were literally out of business in no time. I had to lay off, we only had a handful of people, but I had to lay everybody off. Because the rest of they had enough of our money tied up to where it literally just killed us. Then I never put the company into bankruptcy, but I just went to all the creditors and went, look, here's here's where we are. We have income coming in. We had royalty income from places where we licensed the property, and we had kind of residual sales that we could do that were more direct sales. And I did that for probably 4 or 5 years. That company was, kind of alive in name only. And it was only alive for one reason, to pay off, to pay the creditors. So, all the creditors, that people that we owed money to, all had a percentage of the debt. And so every month I do a thing where, whatever money came in, I take it and do the percentage of the money and send them the money and tell them, what was going on. So I just sent them a letter with the money every month. going, and any one of them could have, forced us to go into bankruptcy, right? They could have forced us into a Chapter 11 or Chapter 7 thing. But, it worked out to where and I didn't get all the debt paid down, but I paid down quite a bit of it over the next few years with the license, with the licensing money. Because once we were out of business, then I took it and licensed those games to other publishers so that they could sell them, and so we get a royalty stream.
Now, what was the name of this?
Developers, other than Harpoon, give it back to the developers.
Now, what was the name of this company? Was this
Alliance Interactive? Very short-lived.
Alliance.
Alliance.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And so that this method of resolving the debt situation allowed you to keep the rights to Harpoon at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, I gave them back to, as soon as we weren't making enough money to make it make sense, the rights reverted to the rights holder, which was fine. I mean, it's a friend of mine. It's not a big, if he could have found a better deal at any moment, I would have given them back to him right then. So,
gotcha.
But we would have still had the residual rights to continue selling what we had. But it was just sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. I think you will learn a lot more, though, when you get knocked down really hard. If you get back up.
And I just have to ask, was the retailer a toy retailer or electronics or mass media?
It was Abco out of New York.
Okay, distributor.
They had bought a lot of product, probably a third of what we had sold, and then distributed it and then said, nah, we're just not going to pay you.
Gotcha.
And I literally didn't have the resources to go after them.
Oh, that's terrible. So where do you go after Alliance?
Well, after Alliance, I'm looking for what's next, right? I'm looking for what's next out there for me. I was doing a little consulting for a few people. I actually interviewed with a company called Sportsline, which was literally like 5 miles away from where I lived, which later got bought by NBC or somebody, right? And everybody there made a crap ton of money. But it was a sports thing, and I'm just not a sport. I don't have an affinity for sports, and that job really needed an affinity for sports. Later on, somebody I was partnered with later interviewed for the same job at the same time and turned it down for the same reasons. So, which I could too. But but it was I loved the guy there, who was running it, and what they were up to made a lot of sense to me at the time because it was early internet stuff, and they were basically going to do digital sports way back before there was such a thing. And it was very well run, and the guy running it was a multi-time successful entrepreneur, so he knew what he was doing. So anyway, that was one of the big things I interviewed for. I did some odds and ends consulting work with people. People knew me and knew what I could do, and it brought me in on some stuff. I did some consulting work. Time Warner was doing a cable modem trial up in Orlando. And I got sucked into that by a friend of mine. And that was pretty interesting to see that way before. That sounds really cool then. Now it's like everybody's got a. What are you talking about? Nobody got a cable modem back then. Nothing. There was nothing like this. They were doing digital delivery back in 1994.
Damn.
So I was very fortunate that I got to do a bunch of interesting things. While I was doing that. And one of the things I got to do is a friend of mine called me and said, hey, we just got bought by News Corp, and we're trying to expand our thing. And, we have, this is a little company. I had like 7 or 8 developers. And they go, we have to grow to like 50 this year. Can you come up and like consult with us and talk to us about what we should be doing, yada, yada, yada. So I did, and they said, we should probably hire you. And so they did. And so I moved to Charlottesville, Virginia to work at Kesmai, which was one of the early internet pioneers. So they had been doing internet games since 1981. This is 1994 or 5, right? 1994 when I'm consulting, 1995 when I got hired. So, they're 15 years in. but they're a tiny company. They're like 7 or 8 guys in the whole company, and but they've been very successful on CompuServe, on Genie. What's the other one that they were on? All the old online services except for Prodigy, they were doing games on, and back then games were paid for by the minute. So, and the service was being sold, for dollars per minute. It's like dollars, and they're getting a percentage of that, and it ends up being, if you make an addictive game, it's a lot of money, very quickly. And not that they were rich or anything, but because it was a very small market. But they were doing just fine, and they got bought by News Corp because News Corp was rolling up an online. They wanted to roll up something that would compete with AOL. And if you remember 1995, AOL was the cock of the walk in 1995. Yeah. They owned the online world, period. If you were online, you were 90% chance you were on AOL. So, this was a very small part of a big play, of a big online play. So it was like the tiniest part of the News Corp online play empire, but it was the entertainment part. So, and this was John Taylor and Kelton Flynn were the owners of the company, and they Fox had walked in and said, "Hey, we're just going to buy you. Here's how much. You're in. You're now all Fox executives. Go to town. Go forth and make a bunch of money." So. They bought me in, and since I'd run development groups before and run external development, we started the same thing. We grew a studio of 50 developers and had probably 4 or 5 or 6 external things going on at the same time. Doing both internal and external development for these, for the internet. Basically, this is kind of pre-internet, right? We're still doing it for online services more than the internet, and. AOL suddenly says, "Oh, we're going to go big into games," and we go, "Hey, we got some games. Let's put our games on AOL." And so we put some of our games on AOL, and all of a sudden our numbers are, like more than 10 times what they used to be. Right? They're gigantic. So we're learning the scaling lessons as fast as we can, and everything's wonderful because at that point AOL is charged by the minute, right? And I think it was in '97. AOL said, "We're going flat rate." And then AOL does what all big companies do. They go back to the people that they have ironclad contracts with, and they go, "By the way, we're just not going to honor that contract. You're screwed. You're out." Which worked for everybody else except us because we were owned by News Corp. And News Corp said, "Hey, we know a lot about suing people. We're going to sue the frick out of you right now. We are going to go after you." So the big learning for me in that job, besides the online business, which was a huge learning curve all in itself, like learning about online versus I'd done standalone games up until then. So that learning curve was wonderful and is still going on today, 25 years later. I'm still in the middle of that learning curve. But go ahead.
Yeah. Now, actually, the lawsuit thing is very interesting.
Well, I'm going to get into the lawsuit thing. It's more fun than a barrel of monkeys.
You're talking to a lawyer here. I want to hear this one. But before we get into that, so when you get to Kesmai, you were brought in. Are there any? They have a bunch of games already running. Are there any particular games that you are directly involved in the development of? Or are you?
Well, I'm kind of involved in all of them, but Air Warrior was the #1 game, right? Air Warrior was the biggest game, had the most revenue. Legends of Kesmai probably came up as the second game. It was more of a text mud than a graphical game though, so it wasn't all that difficult. We had a couple others, Stellar Emperor, and Harpoon actually had an online version that I'd helped them get licensed to and worked on some. So they had Harpoon too, Harpoon Online, which was cool. Kind of fun. And there's probably 3 or 4 others that I'm not thinking of right at this minute. But we and they had stuff in progress, and we started even more games. But these online games, were very nascent of what was going to come later, right? There just, there wasn't a lot of stuff. Air Warrior was very unusual because there weren't that many graphical online games. And
Yeah.
Airway was a full-blown 3D flight simulator that you played with hundreds of other people dogfighting together. It was pretty awesome.
Yeah. Back then, I mean, unimaginable for most of us. I mean, we
Yeah.
could dream of that in a science fiction novel, but we were never going to see it.
Yeah.
Now,
Just,
so when you're looking at all this, are you guys actually running the games off of the provider's servers, or is it just sort of they're just a pass through to your own machines?
well, on the old online services, it was kind of a mixture, but quite often you were ending up in their infrastructure. You ended
Okay.
up having to run inside their infrastructure. By the time we were doing AOL, we were running the infrastructure ourselves. So the players started on AOL, but they ended up on our servers. AOL did all the, who are they, which account, all that stuff, but they were playing on servers that we owned that were typically in a co-location place, like in, Virginia, not where we were in Virginia, but, at one of the central hubs of the internet.
Gotcha. Now, was this still a business model based off of the initial software was being sold as physical media, and then patches might be installed? Or
No, so remember, until 1997, it was pay by the minute or pay by the hour, and we got a percent of the take. So, and that business was if you can make a game that people really want to play, they'll play a lot of it. If they play a lot of it, you get paid a lot. So in fact, all MUDs, if you think about it, all the early online games were made to be kind of time sinks. They're made to keep you compelled and playing for hours and hours and hours. And that wasn't all driven by that business model, but some of it was. Some of it was driven by that business model. So, so let's talk about that part first. So now the world flips, right? So AOL pretty much owns the online world at that moment. The web browsers are just starting to appear in 1997 for consumers, right? And I never saw a web browser before 1995, right? But in 1997, they're starting to get some propagation. Netscape is actually, people have it, and they may have access to the internet. So this flip happens on the business model side, where they go, we're going flat fee. It's going to be $12.99 or $14.99 or whatever. And we go, crap. And for me, it was very clear. It was like super clear. When they made that announcement, immediately I knew, wow, we just went from a, kind of low risk, medium upside business into a high risk, medium upside business. So, because suddenly I knew we're going to need 10 times the volume we used to have the same income. And our, nothing's going to change about it. Everything's going to still cost us what it costs us to make it. But we're going to need a lot more customers because they're going to be paying us a lot less. And in fact, we actually don't want people playing all the time because all that time is costing us money. Basically, we're paying for the bandwidth, right? We're paying for the servers to be there. If a bunch of people come, we need more servers. The servers cost money and the bandwidth costs money, right? So we have a lot of variable costs. And now they're giving it away for a fixed fee price. So we bear all, we have all these high costs. They have, but there's only a fixed amount of money to pull from. Right. So it's bad news for the game business as far as it being super lucrative, right? It suddenly went from being, hey, this is pretty lucrative. If we could scale it, we can make a lot of money. And to suddenly, we have to scale it and we're going to kind of make medium money. So if we're successful. So that was the one consequence of that. It's a titanic shift, right? It's a sudden dramatic shift in how the whole business works. On the lawsuit side, basically, they told every game developer, tough luck, we're not going to pay you royalties at all anymore. We're not going to pay you a percent of the whatever, $12.99 or whatever we're selling for. We're paying you nothing. And whatever we wrote in the contract, tough shit. You can't do anything. And most of the developers were pretty small and couldn't do anything and literally had to roll over to that. News Corp didn't. So I got to learn all about depositions. I got to learn all about discovery, truckloads of documents and discovery. We never made it to court, but we did everything else. And in the end, there was a settlement. And I would say that News Corp was happy with the settlement. And the reason was we continued to get paid by the hour, even though they were charging a flat fee. And AOL didn't want to do that because it was super negative profitable for them. But what it meant is they wouldn't put up another game, even though, our agreement said that we had a bunch of other games to come. And they, did everything they could to, put roadblocks in your way to make it go away after that.
Wow.
But at least, our business wasn't instantly killed, which was the other side of what could have happened. So in the meantime, we rolled out a service called GameStorm. So we went directly to the internet, also with a flat fee, but we had a direct connection to our customers. So here, play all the Kesmai games, any Kesmai game you want, 24/7 for a fixed price.
Oh.
So we rolled that out in less than a year, probably in 8 months. From the moment
the Game Pass of its time.
Yeah. So it'd be fast today to do that. I promise you, it was very difficult to do that. But we had one of the first, one of the very first, not the first, but one of the very first internet game services, multi-game services. And for that, we were out acquiring games. Like we acquired the Interplay game. Interplay had an online service too, and we acquired their games to be part of our service. We had games like I said, games in progress with third parties, like Mark Jacobs' earlier company was doing several games for us, but some of them licensed. They were doing a Aliens Online game for us that eventually came out, and that, a couple of others. Godzilla game. We did a Godzilla game, back in that Godzilla time frame. So, it was a go-go thing, right? We were shaking and moving and trying to make our little business. But you're talking about, it's not a very big business. I mean, we have maybe 80 or 90 people. It's a $6 or $7 million business. It's not a big business, right? And we're still part of News Corp, but in the News Corp stuff, when you look at all the companies in News Corp, we'd have a little dash because our numbers were so small that, they were doing tens of millions, so we got a dash, right?
Yeah. You were a rounding error.
Yeah, we were a rounding error, big time. The nice thing about being a News Corp, we were talking about, making things like a Narnia game, right? We went and talked to the Narnia people and, put together a prototype for Narnia and other Fox properties. We had access to a lot of Fox and was it Harcourt, whatever, their book publisher, had properties. And so, it was good. It was good that we got, we had a lot of benefits for being part of News Corp.
Gotcha. And now, were all the games that were being developed during this period being developed, or the business plans for the development set up so that they would work as part of this flat fee subscription for the website? Yes. Or okay.
And we also did a hybrid game, and we did games that we sold at retail that also you had to subscribe to a service to get them. So okay. Air Warrior, was originally an online-only game, but Air Warrior, we came out with something called, I think the first one was just called Air Warrior Online, and then we did Air Warrior 2 and 3, and we published those through Interactive Magic, which at the time was Wild Bill Staley's, post-Microprose company was called Interactive Magic. Yeah. And so they were publishing our games, and they published a Harpoon for me, a Harpoon 97, which was, again, part of that Alliance Interactive thing. I had an updated version of Harpoon. They published it. The money that came in from that was paying my creditors from before. So that was my night job, to work on Harpoon. And my day job was to work at Kesmai.
Gotcha. And now, how did that move from just from a budgeting standpoint and from a planning standpoint? How did the move from like you said, you make the game, you sell it at retail, that's the end of that story, so to speak. The planning of, okay, how much can we invest? How much time, money can go into this game? How did that change when you were starting to think about developing new online content?
Well, it's the same process. You're looking at what what's the lifetime value of the game to you? and how quickly you're going to recover your investment, right? So just because, it's gone to online versus gone to, come from a box, it's the same calculation. It's just different flows. So if we have a customer base, that we can sell to, that makes it easier. If you have to go acquire customers, you not only have to pay for making the game, you got to pay for marketing to get the new customers, right? So nothing really changed other than, some of the variables were different. That's all.
And
it's still the same thing. You're looking at it like any business. Hey, it's going to cost me X to make it. How many of them can I sell? And in the case of software, right, the more you sell, the better off you are because the cost of delivering it is very low. To make a copy of it, it's not like I got to go to a printing press, right? People can get a copy real quick.
Gotcha. Now, what was the expected lifespan of the, let's say, average online game back then? What were you calculating?
We didn't know. We thought they were all infinite for the most part because it was pretty rare to shut one down once you had one. I mean, unless a major competitor would come out and make it to where no customer would play yours because the other thing was so better than yours. So we didn't know. We didn't. We were mostly though budgeting to try to say, we have to recover our money within the first year.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, if you think about box games, most box games recover all their money in the first day of launch, or at least the first month of launch, right? Or they're not successful because that's where the bulk of the sales are. But online sales are different. Online sales have a much longer tail than box sales.
That's true. So you're at Kesmai. You guys have all this stuff in the pipeline. You've got the backing of News Corp. When do you decide to leave?
Well, in my fourth year, I was under contract there. So, unlike a lot of jobs, right, I actually had a contract, right, to be there. I was a senior vice president at News Corp, which was kind of cool, even though it was really a more show than go, right, because we're the tiniest company in News Corp, as near as I can tell. But we got to the end of the year and they said, oh, by the way, we're not doing contracts next year. I go, oh, that's not a good sign. So it's what I thought. That's not a good sign. So I hadn't even been thinking about doing anything else because I was having such a good time there. It was a really great crew there. And Charlottesville is a wonderful little town. It's the smallest town I think I've lived in for a long time. And it's a little college town in the middle of Virginia, right? Very historic. And the people there were all awesome. Like the first year we were there, Laura and I, they had a 4th of July parade, and you would have thought you were in 1950.
Really?
Like, the 4th of July parade was, like something out of a movie. But how, quaint and, charming it was versus, and right now we're in the 90s, right? People are pretty cynical and stuff. But, small town Virginia wasn't like that then. So, Charlottesville's got a bad reputation now from all the stuff that went on, but Charlottesville was a very charming place to live, is what I would say.
Gotcha.
So I'm at the end of this thing, and I hadn't even thought about looking for a job, right? Hadn't even crossed my mind. And they said, well, we're not doing contracts. I go, wow, maybe I should look up and look around just in case. So, I put a couple of feelers out with people I knew, and next thing you know, and looked at, what jobs were kind of coming across the transom. And 2 kind of jobs stuck out. One was to executive produce Falcon, F-16 Falcon at Spectrum Holobyte, which I think by that time was Microprose, had acquired Microprose. And they were trying to do their latest, greatest super version. And to run Ultima Online at Origin. So, and they were desperate at Origin to have somebody who actually knew something about online come in and help them. And so I kind of prepped for both jobs interviews, right? I was prepping for both job interviews, and I went on the Origin one first. And before that, I'd played UO for probably 3 months before that. So I played UO. fairly extensively. Definitely loved the game. I hated the game the first, maybe 20 hours I played it because I was failing at it because I didn't understand it, right? And then, the person who told me to go and play it, I call them up and I go, hey, here's what I'm doing, and this game sucks. How can you possibly like this game? It's terrible. And they go, no, you're just not doing it right. Here, do these 3 things in a row. Do these 3 to 5 things in a row, and you'll start to get in a cycle of success. And they were right. Once I knew that, but the game didn't tell you to do that, right? Of course, the game was super open world, and of course filled with terrible people. We'll get to that later. So I went to that UO interview and Origin, and they, I had interviewed at Origin many years before. Thought about taking a job there. Once upon a time, they're back in Texas, right? I'm from Texas. It's an easy sell to get me to Origin, basically. But the game, knowing what I knew about the game and what its potential was, and knowing what I knew about what I could do, and that they didn't know what they could do, I knew that I could make a difference if I could get there. So I really wanted that job. I actually never did the F-16 Falcon interview. I called up the recruiter or the company and said, I'm out on that. I'm not going to, I even if I don't get this job, I'm out on that because I really need to be doing my online thing, right? What it reminded me, and the thing that got me at Kesmai was where I understood that, we could literally change the world with what we were doing. That we didn't know the rules around this, that there was going to be a huge amount of discovery involved. It was a frontier. The online world is a frontier, and we were pioneers trying to figure it out. And that was very, very stimulating to me. It was extremely, right up my alley. So I got really excited about that. And at one point at Kesmai, I said, really my job here is to make this medium more than it is today, right? Like I can be a causal in actually making the medium better if I can apply my talent in the right place at the right time. And so Origin was the first time I saw, I have an opportunity to go someplace and really leverage my talent to maybe make a difference in the whole medium, like change it. Because I knew when people touched it, they were going to be stuck, right? They were going to touch it, and they were going to get sucked in. I knew that because it was so compelling. So that's what got me going, right? That was my internal motivation, was all around that. So they did offer me the job at Origin. I turned it down twice because they wouldn't do the title right. And then, I didn't really care about the money, but they wouldn't do the title right. And so I turned it down until I got a VP title at EA. So, and they made me VP of Online to take the job over.
Now, why was the title important to you?
Because I knew how big companies worked. I knew how.
And so, what doors or what options did the VP title open
when
for?
When you're a VP, you're titular officer of the company, right? So that means that you have larger signing authority. You have the authority to do more things. Like as a director, I'd never be able to do contract work, right? A VP is going to be doing the contract work, right? And also, I knew I needed to own the IP. If I was going to drive the IP, I needed to own the IP. And as a director, I wouldn't be able to do that. I'd have some schmuck, some VP schmuck over me who was doing
that. So you decided you needed to be the VP.
I needed to be my own schmuck, yes. Gotcha. Now, of course, I had bosses. I had multiple bosses who were telling me what to do. But they knew that I knew more than they did about it, so that was helpful.
Cool. So when you arrived there, this is, 98, 99?
No, it's 99, right? Right at the beginning of 1999. So I was at Kesmai from 95 to 99 to early, like January 99, and then I went to Kesmai.
Now, what is the status of UO in particular and the MMORPG market at the time that you enter Origin?
All right, so I enter Origin. It's probably 3 months after Second Life shipped. So the first expansion for UO. UO2 is going big guns, right? There's probably, at that point, maybe 30 to 40 people on UO2, maybe more. Later, it was like 65 to 70. But, there's a lot of people on UO2. There's almost no one left working on UO. They've stripped the team down to almost nothing, right?
Wow.
And I walk in the door, and my very first week, I get pulled into one of the crazy exec meetings. And then the exec meetings, maybe it was the second week, but it was very soon after showing up. I get pulled in this meeting, and they go, we're working on this UO2 thing. We're going to, we're totally going to kill UO and bring UO2 out. And I go, do you understand who the UO audience is? Do you have any idea who these people are? Do you know what's going on? I mean, do you really know what's going on here? Have they shown up here and accosted people in the parking lot? Haven't they, haven't you had to call security on them? Don't they show up like every week at the door with some sob story? I mean, hasn't the lead designer and the producer had death threats put in their mailbox? I mean, do you have any idea who you're dealing with this audience? And not the whole audience, right? It was a tiny fraction of the audience. But, I go, these people, this is not something, the love will turn to hate and you will be killed. I'm not talking about like theoretically, I'm talking about like physically. I go, you guys are nuts. You guys are nuts if you think you're going to shut down UO. Because the game you're making, UO2 was not UO, right? It was actually a subset of UO. It was a tiny subset of UO. It didn't have anywhere near the number of the systems. It was more just combat and crafting and nothing, and very little crafting.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. It was pretty. It was damn pretty. It was gorgeous, right? But to build UO in a 3D world like that would have cost about 3 times what they were spending. And taken much more longer too. But anyway, so I just said, you guys are, if you guys are damn serious, I have to quit today because I can't be involved in this because I want to live. You guys clearly don't, and you're going to die in terrible, painful ways if you do this. So that took them a little bit aback. And I said, look, if you're really serious about this, if you're really going to sunset UO, you better give it to the players. If you give it to the players, you're safe. If you actually kill it, you're going to have a serious problem because people have invested their lives there. They're going to see it as very personal because I already understood that audience. I understood where they were at. And they were, they really, really cared about UO. UO's alive today. Yeah. Why? Because of that. You'd have almost all online games are murdered, they don't die of neglect. They do. You can neglect them and maybe get them dead, but they mostly die because somebody kills them, right? Mm-hmm. Before it kills them while the customers still want it.
Gotcha.
So anyway, that was an interesting start to my career at Origin. Was them telling me I thought I was going to have to quit my first month because of that, because I knew what would happen, and I didn't want my name on that because something bad would happen to me. But the thing is, over the next few months, we grew UO. We kept growing it. So every time they wanted to kill it, we were making more money. And of course, UO2 was spending more money and not making any money. So, and I wanted UO2 to be successful too, right? But it was a different game. It was not a true sequel. They were calling it UO2 because it was the best game they could, the best name they could come up with, really, to sell it easier. And that game, took a lot of the talent off the UO team. But eventually, very few of the UO people were actually on that team because they didn't like the size and bureaucracy of it mostly. Because UO was made by a pretty small team that was, pretty tight. Most of those guys rotated, went out and started their own companies and did stuff. Because they knew how to do the important stuff. They knew how to do good stuff. So I got to rebuild the live team, and we started, making UO better. That was I knew all we had to do was make UO better, and more people would play it. If we could rub some of the rough edges off, more people would play it. So that was my goal all along. How do we improve the customer service? How do we improve the user experience of the game? How do we improve the delivery of the game to people? How do we do a better job of telling people what it is versus what it isn't, right? All those things I could, help either get the right people with us to help us do that, or help do it myself, right? But mostly I just brought in great people to run stuff inside of UO. So, whatever happened at UO was more on those people than on me. I was just trying to make an environment where that could happen.
Now, obviously, Origin is owned by EA at this point.
Yep.
And the question I guess I have, and you've pretty much already answered it, I think, with the UO2 issues. What was your perception of EA's understanding of the dynamics of an online game at that point? What lessons do you think they had learned, good or bad, from the UO experience?
So I'm going to back up a little bit on that question, and that is because here's my observation. Okay, so I'm an old guy now. I've been in a bunch of different companies. Companies, particularly successful companies, have a very hard time changing most of the time, because once they have a success pattern, and they can pound that pattern. And at EA, they literally, so that they didn't, like, nobody corporate said that there's a playbook, but everybody who worked at EA goes, oh, there's an EA playbook. Here's how we do things, right? There's almost an unwritten playbook about how do we operate, how do we make games, how do we do stuff. And believe me, online was not in that playbook. It wasn't in the playbook. And it was new and it was different. And I could go, and I was out preaching the gospel of why it was different and what we needed to do to be better at it. And believe me, I would spend a lot of time preaching the gospel to execs and go and being able. I got to go to several EA studios and talk to them because a lot of them wanted to get into online. So I, have to go say, here's the learning we have. Here's what's challenging about it. Here's what's challenging about doing it inside of EA, for example, right? So, intrinsic company culture learning, 0 to negative is what I would say most of the time. They didn't understand it. So, Larry would get really upset when some customer would find a way to get to him and tell him a sob story about how screwed he was by the Ultima Online and, how the people running it were terrible and, they killed his dog or, whatever. The stories would be endless. And we just get an email going, make this guy go away, right? That's what we get the email for. So, and it was, it was challenging. It's new territory, right? So, the laws around stuff are not that clear. People would be doing illegal stuff and, what do you do about it? What the laws aren't even, now we're just kind of getting to the point where the law is catching up to the digital world for the most part, mostly because the finances have gotten so big, right? So finally the law has to catch up. But, at this point, we have a direct relationship with Visa. We're running our own stuff. There's no, we have our own billing system, right? There's none of the things that exist now where you can't do that unless you're a giant company, right? We could do that as a little company. So it was very, very interesting. But yeah, the core of your question is big companies who are successful on one line of business have a very difficult time getting in a different line of business. And the challenge for people in games at that time is they couldn't see why should online games be any different than box games. Right?
Gotcha.
And they do the box game business. If you know something really well, you try to pound it into that paradigm, right? You're trying to say, well, yeah, I see what you're saying. It's like this over here on the thing I'm doing, right? Not really. It's not really like that. It's not quite like that. But, they couldn't hear it, right? They couldn't absorb that data. Or I was terrible at communicating it. Probably both. So.
Okay. Now, when you said you were trying to get the rough edges off of UO, make it more user-friendly and so forth, was that just ideas springing from your own use of UO? Was it looking at the other games that were on the market at the time? And what does that look like? And how do you even communicate that to people who aren't playing the game that this is happening?
Well, all the games were terrible then, right? So it's not like all the online games were terrible. So it's not like there was a shining example you could point to and go, let's be like them. I mean, just an anecdotal story. Like before I got to UO, basically QA would collect bugs from emails. And at the end of the month, they'd have 20, 30,000 bugs, and they just delete them and then start over again.
Oh, Jesus.
Because there's nobody to work on those bugs. There's no, we fixed 100 of those 30,000 bugs, right? So that month. So there's no, the volume of problems, right, were so large, but the game was so great, people would play through it even with all the problems, right? We were constantly pounding down managing the live team, trying to balance between let's do something new and exciting, but let's fix a lot of what's broken at the same time, and you only have a limited number of people, right? Mm-hmm. And my pitch to my managers was always, we are getting payoffs and retention when we're fixing more stuff. But for acquisition, we need to do new features to draw people into the game. So I really need two teams. I need more resources. I need a lot more resources. And as we perform better, right, as we sold more copies and collected more money, I got more resources, right? So as we perform better, I got a little bit more resources. We perform better, I get a little bit more resources. So over time, we did get more resource to throw against the problems.
Cool.
So, but it was, when I walked in, the game had about 100,000 subs, right? Well, I think we got up to, it was in that 100 to 120 range, which was the biggest online game in the world at that time, right? We were the big kahuna. And within the first 6 months, we got up in the 140s, and at the end we got up to 250. So right under, it was like 249 something. So it was our best month. And those are monthly payers. Those aren't just trial people. They're monthly payers. So it was a pretty good business at that point. The challenge was, and at that point we were like getting close to, like on a lifetime basis, like over the years, we're starting to get close to, hey, we might even get into the top 10 EA franchises. Of course, but we were a little business, right? We were doing like 25 million a year, 25, 30 million a year. And that's nothing inside of EA back then, right? But a franchise would come out, sell a bunch, and then go away, but it's probably less than $100 million overall. And we, by the year 4, are getting close to $100 million, right? Because we just keep on going. We're the Energizer Bunny. So that's the thing about an online business, that they even when they did EA Online, even later, even when we were later, when I was at BioWare inside of EA doing Star Wars: The Old Republic, they didn't really they were trying to do a big digital transfer. We're transferring to digital revenue, right? But they still, at the bones of the company, right? The bones of the company we're a packaged goods company. And it's very, very, and you see it's taken decades, to change that inside of EA. And still, it's a struggle at times, I bet.
Now, you were also there when Third Dawn launches.
Yep.
Now, where does the concept for that come from? Was it, and how was it connected, if at all, with the eventual cancellation of UO2?
Oh, it had no connection to UO2. Okay. It was just, I think, and I don't recall exactly, someone did a little tech experiment and said, look, we can do this thing. We went, oh, that's cool. Maybe I can get it funded. And yeah, we got it funded to do a new client. And the discovery was a bunch of people wouldn't leave the old client, by the way. So today they still have to support 2 clients, because once people are in a play pattern, this is again part of the learning when you're on on the frontier, is you go, damn, here we offered them something better. And if we take it away from them, they'll scream and they might come kill us. So we can't take it away from them. So,
it's new Coke.
Yeah. Yeah. So, it was a cool thing to do, right? At that point, we had a whole team, working on the 3D client. And I mean, there were a lot of restrictions in the original UO client that we had to code around. Like adding art was really, really hard for a long time until we finally came up with a system to layer on more art, because of the way it was architected. It was architected in a way that made it super difficult to add anything. It was like, oh no, you have everything you'll ever need, no problem. So we make no allowances for adding anything ever. So But they did have again, it's an amazing game. It was an amazing game the day it launched. It's still an amazing game today.
Hmm. And so how long do you stay at Origin, and why do you eventually leave Origin?
So at the end of my second year there, EA has started up a bunch of other online games by about a year and a half into my thing. So we're consulting, they're coming to us and we're going out to them to help them as they try to ramp up online game teams to build online games when none of those companies had ever built an online game before, right? So they have a Motor City Online going on in Seattle, right? Westwood has Earth and Beyond going on. We have UO2, and there was one other big one that I can't remember right now. But all these games are like in progress, right? And so EA's made four big bets, four, multi tens of $1 million bets to build these games, to do online. And they wake up one day and they go, that's a lot of money, and we're not sure we believe in this that much anymore anyway. We're in the middle of making sports things and making a lot of money, and this may not be the right idea. So they literally wake up one day and say, and my boss's boss calls me in. They would visit. Like the EA guys would like fly in every month or 6 weeks and we do a dog and pony show for them, right? So he pulls me aside and he says, "Look, and next month we're going to shut down UO2. We're going to kill it, and we're killing all these other games. The only one we're going to leave is Earth and Beyond. Like you always want to call it Earth and Behind, but that's petty. But and that it's not because it wasn't a good game. It was a good game. It just had some flaws that NEA didn't support it, which also wasn't helpful. And really support it. And he said, I want you to come and do the Sims Online. He goes, you can either stay and work on UO, but I think we're going to move UO to San Francisco. And I go, I don't want to move to San Francisco, but and of course, Sims Online is right across the bay and Walnut Creek then, of course, too. But they go, we really, we know that you know what you're doing. This is we know we got to get there eventually, but we're just not that committed to it right now, right? But Sims Online is our biggest wholly owned franchise, and we want to take it online, and we think that's the right one to spend the money on, not all these other games. I knew probably before anybody but the head of the studio and I, knew first that they were talking about killing UO2. And unfortunately, a month or two before that, they literally said, Gordon, go do an evaluation on UO2 because they keep falling, they keep missing dates, right? They missed a lot of dates. They kept falling behind. They kept saying, alpha next week, kind of thing, and never got that alpha. So I did a tech evaluation. I pulled a couple other guys out of other parts of Origin, and we went in together and did an evaluation of the project. And, I said, look, here's where they are. They're really a year away, right? They're really, they're not really, they were like, we're 3 months away, kind of thing. But they weren't 3 months away. They were a year away. And they had a couple of pretty, deficit areas where it was kind of screwed up. That they needed to go ahead but they kept on not fixing them, thinking we're 3 months away when they really should fix them because they weren't 3 months away. So, and that report probably didn't help with the decision making about that, because unfortunately I'm one of those people who I don't actually think about the political consequences of what I'm doing. I'm like, oh, you give me a job, I'll go do the job, right? I'll do the best job I can. I'll be as honest as I can about it. And that was probably not the right idea. I learned later as a VP. But they ended up, we did end up killing UO2. We laid off everybody. I had to lay off probably half those people myself. And it was a real pain in the ass, right? A lot of great people left Origin. UO was about as big as it had ever been by then. It just kept growing while, all this other stuff was going on. So they were mostly happy with UO. They didn't. Here's the thing. So here's the thing that goes back to the big company thing. So the big company thing is, hey, we're EA. We make 60% margins because we sell boxes, and we make 60% of the money as the margin, right? The box just costs a little bit of money, and then we make all the rest of the money. On an online business, if you're really, really good, you can get to 50-50. You can get like 50% of the money. But most of the time, you're doing like 40%, right? So I had people in EA tell me, hey, you can't do much better because if you get much bigger, you're actually going to start to drag our percentage down in the public market, and the public market will be comparing us to people who only have box games, and we'll look like we're underperforming.
Oh, Jesus Christ!
So don't be too successful. But I literally had people tell me that.
That's an insane.
No, from their point of view, right? From the world that they were operating in, they were absolutely correct. And that's what I learned at EA. EA is a pretty brutal place in a lot of ways, but it's about looking at stuff as it is rather than the way you want it to be. I learned a lot about just while I was there about how to run a business.
Gotcha.
And I'm not saying that was the best thing ever, right? That part was not the fun part.
No.
But so I went out and saw the Maxis team, and I decided to take the job. And of course, I go out there and I land in the job, and the first thing I find out is they didn't let me do a tech evaluation before I went out, before I took the job. So I get out there and then I dive in real deep, and I go, crap, they're building the online game like it's a standalone game, right? There's no online people here. What they've done is kind of done something which will never scale and it'll never work, right? Oh. So we're behind the 8 ball right away because they go, oh yeah, we're going to ship in a year and a half, and it's like, you got to start over, right? You don't have anything here. It's not going to work, right? We have to redo this. I got to bring in some big guns. And a couple of people I bought in said, I'm not taking that job. That's impossible. These guys are crazy. They wouldn't take the job. So some of my best guys I would have liked to brought with me.
What was the big problem from your perspective at that time? Was it a core idea of how they devised the gameplay that was unmanageable, or?
Yeah, well, they didn't really understand client server gaming, at all, really, right? They had some half-baked ideas about it that they were executing on. The people they have were like everyone, right? So, and here's part of my learning that back at Kesmai. So I come into Kesmai, I know a lot about making games, right? I'm 17 years into making games. I made a lot of games by the time I hit Kesmai. I think I have it down to a science. I think I'm, sitting on the plateau of mastery, right? I'm a master at making games. And what I had to do at Kesmai was literally go back to square root because all my learning was like 180 degrees out for being successful making an online game. Like I had to unlearn a whole bunch of stuff to just be able to make an online game because you got to look at the game differently. You're not trying to make a crafted experience that one person will experience, right? You're trying to figure out how am I going to make something to where everybody has the illusion that they're all together, and it looks like it's working, which is more magic than you might know to make that happen. So, and all bright people who really know the real game, the kind of standalone games business, make all the same mistakes when they go into an online game for the first time. It's like as night follows day, I can almost chart the time it'll take them to come to the aha moment of go, wait, Jon Snow, you know nothing, right? That's where you got to get to that place where you go, wait, I know nothing, right? I have to relearn this from a different point of view. So it was super challenging. And again, Maxis was a company that was super freaking successful, right? They were way successful. They didn't really want to learn anything. They wanted to teach people, right? Because they're super successful. And so that's a big, that was a big challenge going in there trying to say, okay, how are we going to make this into a real online game? One, built on this framework, because the framework again was The Sims. The Sims is a framework that was built to be a standalone game to deliver a very personalized experience. On top of that, Will had a lot of strange ideas about online games. So if you think about Will Wright, right? He's the guy who made SimAnt, right? So he's like, he has a way of looking at the world. He's a genius. Hands down, one of the few. I've worked with probably 6 or 7 geniuses. He's one of them. But the thing is, for Will, the thing where the Sims where you tortured your Sim, he knew that would work because he loved doing that, right? He knew that would work for people. And he thought, hey, when we're in this online game, I'm going to get to do that too. I'm going to get to go in and torture people. I go, we ban people like that, right? Even if it's you. So, you really don't want to set up the game because one of those people can run off 100 of your paying customers. You might not want that. So, so he had some strange game design ideas that he needed to work out because he didn't play online games. He just, he theorized about them, right? He wasn't a MUD player, right? He hadn't played online before this. So there was a lot of challenges for the job. I did really enjoy working with Will. My conversations with him were certainly stimulating in a whole bunch of ways.
Gotcha.
But, but a lot of internal inertia to kind of make a game that's going to work right. We spent a lot of money on it. They claimed we spent $100 million. We didn't get that on development, but it was a lot of money. We had a lot of people on the team. Toward the end, when we were doing QA, we had over 300 people in QA around the world testing the game all 24 hours a day, and a giant build system that would build the game as fast as we could possibly build it because it took about 2 hours to build it, or 3 on a regular computer. So, if we could buy all the best hardware in the world, we could get that down to about an hour and a half. So it was great to do a big game, but we went to E3 and showed just kind of the social part of the game, not the game. The game nobody ever saw because we never did it. But the social part, like people just interacting with each other like they were Sims.
Yeah.
And the demos went so well that my boss just said, hey, we're just going to ship that. And I go, we can't ship that. It won't stick. It won't be sticky, right? We're in the subscription business. We're not in the initial sale business. It's not going to work out, right? And he goes, no, I know it will. He didn't know anything about online either, right? But so I thought, no, this is EA. They're super rational. One thing about EA is they're super rational when they have data, right? So I arranged to have the game tissue tested every week, moving up to, in the 3 months before launch. I started getting a tissue test done, which means we'd use people to test it and we'd never use again, one-time use, right? So we'd have them test the game, and then we'd say to them, really there were only 2 questions that mattered. Will you buy the game, and will you recommend it to your friend?
Yeah.
Goodbye. All right? So the graph of those answers was going down as we were going to launch. So I go, cool, I got my data, right? We're not ready to launch because look at the data. The data says no way we should launch because, in fact, we're not getting those numbers need to be flat or going up for us to launch. So I take those, to exec, both all the way up to, the presidents of the company, and I go, look, we're in a bad place, right? But they had promised the street that they would ship it on a particular date already. They told Wall Street, hey, we're going to ship the Sims on such and such a date. So they, when I bought the data to them, they said, what we're going to do, we're going to up the marketing budget. We're going to add $6 million more to the marketing budget. That's what we'll do. That'll overcome these problems. The game's no fun. And they did.
Okay.
And then, Will actually went and talked to Larry about it. He told me he talked to Larry about it and said, Larry, look, we're not really ready to ship. This is not going to work well. It's not going to end well, right, where we are. And he got no traction either. He told me he talked to Larry about it. So they went ahead and shipped it. And, of course, immediately it was flat, a lot of negative word of mouth, yada, yada, yada. Because there wasn't any there, right? Once you played it for about 10 hours, you were done. And that's not an online game. You can't play an online game for 10 hours and have it work. So I came up with a plan. So I'm going to back up. But immediately on launch, I had a plan. Okay, look, here's our recovery plan. Here's what we do. Here's what we need to put in the game, and here's the time frame that we can put it in with the team that we have. And then we can essentially do a relaunch around the fact that it's now, Sims Online, now a game, basically. Because we had a plan to make all that game, right? They just cut it so that we could ship by a particular date already. So I just had to make the plan for how we were going to do enough of that to make it shippable. But truthfully, like about 4 or 5 months before we launched, after they told us, by the way, we're just adding money to the thing, I went to my bosses, my two direct bosses, and I said, look, I'm out of here after we, 3 months after we ship, I'm gone, right? So you guys need to start doing your transition stuff for that. They wouldn't, they didn't tell the team, right? No, they didn't tell anybody. I found out later they never told anybody. They didn't tell anybody up the chain. They didn't tell anybody down the chain about that. So, 3 months after launch, I'm walking up to them and going, my last day is like next week, and you still haven't told the team about this. And they go, yeah, maybe we'll tell them next week. So my wife is in Texas looking for a house, right? And she's pretty good about this stuff. But she called one of her friends, and who has nothing to do with the games business, like one of her personal friends, and said, I'm in town. We should get together. We're moving back next week. They were excited. Yada yada yada. And literally the same day, I get a call from somebody who's not related to that person in any way I understand, saying, I hear you're leaving. What's up? So then it forced the hand in my manager's head to tell people I was leaving.
Oh, wow.
And we've been interviewing people for my job and stuff like that along the way, right? But on the lowdown. But it was kind of a goofy thing. But I was pretty much done with EA at that point. I said, if you'll let me run UO, I'll go run UO. And I went and talked to the guy running, that owned UO at that point, which at that point was Pogo. If you remember the Pogo games, the web game guys owned UO at that time.
Oh, really?
And it was pretty clear I couldn't work for that guy, is what I found out. I really wanted to run UO again, but I couldn't work for that guy. So that was really the only thing inside of EA that even held any interest to me. So I knew I was doomed to leave EA. But again, didn't have anything, hadn't talked to anybody, whatever. And we moved back to Texas.
Was there any possibility of you initiating your own project inside of EA? I mean,
no. Well, remember, they weren't investing in online. They just got burned again. Right? And remember the EA.com thing, which was, I didn't even talk about all the work we did in EA.com. But the EA.com thing was a big blow up, and it literally got John fired, right, from EA, Rick Tello.
So what was your involvement with EA.com?
Well, everybody who was in online in EA got sucked into EA.com, right? And EA.com was going to own all the online. And the theory was we were going to build this giant online service called EA.com, and we were going to have like 50 to 100 games in it, all at the same time. Right, so basically building GameStorm that we built back in Kesmai, just with a lot more games. And so, they bring us all together in like a big town hall meeting for, everybody who's involved in online games to go, look, we have this really aggressive schedule. We're going to do all these games, and we're going to do them by this point in time. We're going to build this giant service. It's going to scale. It's going to be awesome. And it's like, okay, how are you going to do that, right? Where's your online people, right? Except for us, right? For some of the people who know how to do it here. Who's it? Oh, don't worry, we're going to bring in Deloitte and consultants, and they're going to do all the work. And so they had a floor or two in one of the buildings at Redwood Shores filled with Deloitte consultants. And this is when I learned, I was either Deloitte or Arthur Anderson. I don't want to slander either one of them, but, it's the typical, big money consultant thing. So they would come in, recommend pieces of software, and then recommend that they remove features from it that they would get paid to remove. This was my learning about paid consultants. They know exactly how to extract the most money from big companies.
Wow.
So it was terrible. It was just terrible. And we had two big town hall meetings, right, where they, like offsite, brainstorm, let's figure out how we're going to do this crazy thing that we want to do. And, they said, and we're going to pay for this all with advertising. And, I'm like that guy. There's always that guy in the meeting, who raises his hand, and I raise my hand and go, aren't the payments for advertising going down on a month-by-month basis right now? And they don't pay for bandwidth, much less everything else. They're not, they're at that point, advertising was oversaturated, and the price per thousand was just like tiny, right? And it was declining. It had been declining for months, right? It was kind of this is right at the dot bomb time, right? This is 2000, right? It's .com boom time, right? And boom and bust time. Mm. So, just a disaster. And, and when we had our first offsite, I actually got to JR, to Riccatello, and I pulled him aside and I said, JR, for the love of God, if we're going to do this, get a building outside of EA. Get somewhere that's not inside of EA to do it, because the culture of EA is not the culture for online. You can't, if you do it inside an EA building, it's not going to work. And not only did they do it inside of an EA building, they basically put a call out to the company, and every part of the company sent whoever their troublemaker was, they dumped them on EA.com. So whoever was, their low performer, or somebody that they didn't fit with, they sent them all to EA. Oh, your only opportunity is to go to EA.com. So it was staffed with people who didn't want to be there, right? Who didn't have the right skills, and it was inside of an EA building using EA IT, for example. So half the time you're fighting with IT. Hey, we need open ports. We need to be doing some stuff online, right? And IT's job is to shut every port, not let anything into the building, yada yada yada. So it was a disaster. I mean, it was the right idea and the wrong execution. Mm. So I love the idea, and I wanted to be part of making that happen, because I understood if they could pull that off, we would have been basically the NCSoft or Nexon of the U.S. if we'd have been able to pull it off. In fact, I actually went to NCSoft as part of the due diligence, because they were thinking about buying NCSoft back then.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And what was your assessment of them at that time?
They were the best in the world at the time. They were the best company in the world.
And EA didn't put in an offer, or it just wasn't enough?
Well, I think the offer would have had to been higher than they would have wanted to pay, most likely. But it wouldn't have worked anyway. EA is terrible. They would just destroyed it.
Mm, gotcha. Gotcha.
I mean, you can just, the number of companies that they've destroyed buying them is legion. And again, because they're trying to make them fit the culture, right?
Yeah.
It's a culture thing. It's not because they have a design to do it. It's because the culture is that way. So anyway, all that's, so now I'm out of EA, right? I'm out of EA. I'm a free agent. And I'm back in Texas, right where I'm sitting now. And in this house. And I'd say, well, I need to put out some feelers. And now that I'm out of the job, I haven't looked for a job. I haven't talked to anybody, right, until I don't have a job there. And in fact, they came to me and said, oh, by the way, your contract didn't have a non-solicit. We're not going to pay you your bonus for Sims Online unless you sign a non-solicit. And it was like over $100,000. It was serious money. And I said,
now, just for clarification, what is a non-solicit in this?
It means I can't reach out and ask anybody to come work for me who's working for me at that company.
Okay, so
in fact, if I do, I'm subject to criminal and civil penalties. I can be sued and successfully. So I went, well, you never put that in front of me. Of course, I never signed it. So, and now you're going to tell me so now my future employment, which is going to be somewhere, you're telling me, I can't hire anybody. Now, most people will go ahead and sign it, and then they sneakily hire people anyway, right? That's what actually happens. But I have, again, that problem that I can't do stuff, and where I'll think less of myself if I do it. So I said, well, you're giving me a choice. It's not a choice for me. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what I'm doing next. I can't take the money. That's what I said. I can't take the money, right? And because it's going to limit what I do next. Because I've worked with, hundreds of great people, and, I might need 5 or 6 of them. So, and they might come because they like me. So
and because you're terrible. No, okay.
Yeah. So anyway, so I didn't take that money. That was kind of a bummer. That was a bad way to end up leaving EA. But at least I got to leave with my integrity, not shattered. So I call up a few people that I know and say, hey, what's out there? What's cooking? What's interesting? And one of them said, SOE's doing some new stuff. I go, oh, yeah, I know Smedley. I'll give him a call, right? So I ping John and I say, John, hey, are you looking for anything? He goes, yeah, we got stuff going on. We're rocking and rolling. And within a couple of days, he hired me to exec produce a new game. And we didn't know what kind of game it was going to be at that moment. He kind of wanted to get a Sims competitor going, something that would actually be what Sims Online could have been. And, I looked at that and just said, we're rowing upstream, right? You don't have the money. You don't literally have the money to do it, right? You don't have the money. You're not talking about spending that kind of money. You're talking about spending half that kind of money, right, to do it. And that, so that's not a mission. That's not a winnable mission from, given the parameters of what could be done right then. So we cast around for a month looking for what's the right kind of title to do, and eventually. I did a bunch of research, on kind of some topics where games hadn't been done, but were right for an MMO, and we settled on a post-apocalyptic game. Even though it's very polarizing, right? There's a group of people that if you say post-apocalyptic, they're out, right, immediately. But the people who are in are really into it, right? They're into it, right? So that was good. It wasn't going to be the biggest online game ever made, but it was for a niche. That was a very strong monetizable niche, and a big niche, really. Look at Fallout, right? Look at the other games like that. So we started working on this post-apocalyptic game from scratch, right? So I'm doing a game from scratch. It's an online game, but I'm in SOE, so I got access to lots of technology, lots of good stuff, right? I'm in with the Star Wars Galaxies guys, so I'm in the studio in Austin, which is doing Star Wars Galaxies. And they're just shipping it right as we're starting this up. They're just at the point of shipping. So immediately they steal a couple of my guys to help them ship, right? So that's kind of a known. Okay, we knew that was going to happen. And in the post ship, and of course the post ship goes on for a while because Galaxies had a rough start, right? Because it was popular, so it got big quick, and so it had all kinds of problems because it got big. And of course, I'd worked with Rich and Raph, who were running that back at Origin, right? So we knew each other really well. And so for about 6 months, I'm working on this game, and we're showing it to exec. We're taking it out to California, showing it to exec from time to time, and we weren't getting a lot of traction. So we wanted to do a stylized look because we knew it would age better. But it was at some level, it was almost like a shooter, right? So it was a modern post-apocalyptic game, so it had guns in it and stuff. And it's like I don't think they could get over it. Hey, it's not Call of Duty. How come it doesn't look like Call of Duty? How come it doesn't look like Call of Duty? Right? No, well, it's going to be an MMO. We can't make it look like Call of Duty and keep that up to date. And we're not going to compete with Call of Duty on the look anyway, right? They have as many people working on the 3D as we have working on the whole game. So. It wasn't really working, and then Sony got in a little bit of a bind, right? They go, oh, we don't have enough money to do stuff. So we're going to cut your game, and we need you all to jump in and work on Star Wars Galaxies. And we're mad at Rich, so we want you to run Star Wars Galaxies, and Rich will work for you. Because Rich won't do what we say. Well, I'm the wrong person to be the guy who's going to do what you say too, right? But so that didn't work out for them long term. But so, suddenly I'm running Star Wars Galaxies, right? With Rich. I mean, the last thing I ever wanted to do was alienate Rich. So, Rich are like, hey, we're doing this together. They may call me the boss, but we're doing this together. Let's figure out how to do it together. We ran UO together. We can run this together. We said, okay, what are our problems? How do we fix our problems? And again, The game was a great game, but it had some very serious flaws, some problems, and it was amazing. So they built that game for $16.7 million, which seems like a lot of money. It's an incredibly small amount of money for what they built, right? But of course, they rushed it out and didn't finish the combat system, so the combat was kind of so-so at best. It had a lot of depth in a lot of areas, but not uniform depth, right? It had weak areas. And so we're working on saying, how do we shore up the weak areas? And adding my team, it added some throw weights so that we could do a lot more bug fixing and a lot more feature work simultaneously. So we're running. We're doing expansions, like we did the Wookiee thing. Well, I was there before they started, right as they started what was it? Jump to light speed. Right, so when we added space flight, and so we're making expansions, we're fixing bugs, we're trying to make a better game out of it, and so here's the thing: inside of SOE, they're torn, right? They're emotionally torn about Star Wars, because Star Wars at some level is bigger than EverQuest. It's not EverQuest has more accounts, but when they go look, more people have double EverQuest accounts than have double Star Wars accounts, right? So there's like a lot less actual players in EverQuest than they thought, because so many people had double accounts or triple or quad, right? So, and EverQuest was owned by them. Star Wars was something they licensed. They got to pay, Lucas a bunch of money also off of it. So they're always torn. They want it to do great, but if it does too great, it's like, oh, it can't be greater than EverQuest. Our whole company's built on EverQuest. So they're like emotionally torn about every decision about it because of this, right? If we did really good, it would be like, great, you're doing good. Oh, darn it, you're doing really good. Darn it. and so it was very challenging there. Again, this is a corporate culture rules everything. So when the culture's away, you can't really fix the culture. You can maybe change it if the leadership changes, but not too much, right? Because the culture is in everybody who works there. It's not just in the leader, right? So it was challenging being a remote studio as usual, trying to be aligned with corporate and get stuff done and have your own thing going. And we were just trying to make the best game we could make, right, all the time. And it was all my mistake, right? So my mistake was, one of the guys came to me and said, we should really put the wars in Star Wars. What if we had a game, where you could actually have, wars and win planets and all that stuff inside of Star Wars, inside of this game, right? And, we know, our character customization is so good that we can't have too many people on the screen because the frame rate gets too low, yada, yada, yada. But what if when we were doing the wars, they were in uniform, so they all have the same uniform, so now we can get a lot more people on the screen. Each side has the same uniform. Oh, awesome, right? This is like they were all stormtroopers, right? So this maybe could work out. And I said, I hear you, but I think maybe we need to make that as another game. We should make another game, and then we should link the two games together. So you could buy either one game and basically have access to the other. And so I went and I pitched that to both Lucas and our corporate, and they said, "Wow, that sounds great. Let's kill the current game and make the war game."
Oh no!
And I go, "No, you can't do that. You can't do that. You can't simplify. You can't go and simplify Star Wars Galaxies and have it be Star Wars Galaxies anymore. It's not going to work. People will kill us, right? They will be so mad." Because they're all invested in the 47 different professions. So, no, but we want to make it 11 or 10 or whatever, right? We don't want 47 professions. That's complicated. It causes a lot of bugs. And so, it's my own fault for pitching the thing in the first place. So I shouldn't have, but I pitched it as, hey, we can build this game over here. The challenge is, of course, it's with Lucas. Lucas will want another license because it's a different game. Yada, yada, yada. And they said, no, we're just going to do this other thing. And I go, no, we can't do that. We were already doing a combat improvement thing, that hadn't shipped yet.
Yeah.
And then they wanted to do this other thing, the whatever, MPE or new player experience or whatever, right? They wanted to change the whole game. And so finally, called up my boss and I just said, look, I know you want to do this. I'm not going to do it. I know you pay me to do what you tell me to do. I'm not going to do it. I'm just not going to do it because if we do this, we're going to lose a ton of money and a ton of customers and you're going to get a ton of bad will. And he goes, I hear you. And they flew out the next day and fired me, which I said, I was never happier to be fired. And in fact, when they brought me in the room and said, okay, Gordon, you're going to have to go. I said, great. How can I help with the transition? You know, because I was relieved to not have to be there to do that. They still, I think, blamed it on me, but later. But the, you know, and what happened? They shipped it. They lost half their customers, right? They got a big black eye with the community. People don't trust them. You know, a bunch of people will never buy from them again because they don't trust them, right? Everything came true. And after I left, I go, I hope I'm completely wrong. Because if I'm completely wrong, I could have been abusing customers at a much higher level than I ever have before. And I'm going to take that learning and abuse them more wherever I go next, you know, if I'm wrong. Because I really hoped I was wrong. But unfortunately, I was right about that. So I actually got fired from SOE for, you know, being insubordinate and not doing what they told me to do. And I was never happier to be fired because I literally couldn't do it. I didn't want to leave the job because love the teams, love the game, love working on the game. But, you know, I couldn't do that to the game or the community.
Gotcha. Now, I do have a few questions.
I thought it was a fiduciary responsibility, too. And that's the way I put it. Look, fiduciarily, you know, I'm in charge of the IP and in charge of the money it makes, and you're telling me go make less money. I can't do it. I can't do it.
That's a good way of looking at it, actually. Now, going back a couple of steps here. You said you were talking about the detailed models of the game, and this obviously was a licensed game, so there's probably, I'm guessing, and correct me if I'm wrong, that a lot of those detailed models had to do with the fact that you were trying to keep the license as accurate as possible.
No,
no,
had nothing to do with it. It was all about the character customization. So the Star Wars character customization is like one of the Galaxies was one of the benchmarks for that because the level of customization you could do to a character was so extreme. You could change yourself from skinny to fat to, you know, tall to short. You could, you know, and then you have multiple layers of clothing and equipment you could put on, right? And colorization of everything. Everything could be tinted and colored, right? So all that stuff is super cool, and all that stuff means a shit ton of draw calls, right? And on the graphics cards, it's a lot of draw calls, a lot of draw calls. So if you do, the more customization you do, the more GPU you're burning, CPU and GPU you're burning on every character that's on the screen. So you can't have as many characters on the screen if they're super complex like that, and they all were super complex because it's not like you make your character and then we bake it right into like one big draw call. Can't really do it because at any moment in the fight they can just say, "Oh, I'll switch my vest," right?
Oh, Jesus,
you know, or whatever, right? They whatever weapon they're carrying, they can swap in a second, right? So all this stuff, all this customization, fights directly with scale. So that's why you couldn't do the battles. If you have a lot of character customization, very, very difficult to do large number of characters on the screen. Because again, remember your memory for textures and stuff is limited. And if you get enough of it, it's swapping it into regular RAM off the VRAM, which is much, much faster than your RAM. So if every character on the screen has a different set of textures, guess what? You got a lot of textures. Whereas if everybody's in like 3 uniforms, you don't have very many textures and you use them a lot, right? You use them on everybody. So that's what fights. That's the technical part of what fights with us when we're trying to make a game that's super cool.
Gotcha.
If you notice, a lot of online games don't have a lot of customization, and and the reason for that is not because they're lazy. It's because they go, oh, the trade-off is if I'm, you know, like we're fighting with this in Crowfall right now. right? When, we have a fair amount of customization, and it hurts us when we try to get, 100 people on the screen.
Gotcha. And so at that time, was there a standardized process, or what was the process for determining, okay, where do we have to draw the line because that we won't have a large enough user base that has the hardware necessary to play this game? And because this is an online game that's going to be around for a while, how much can you say that, well, it'll be here in 2 years, and in 2 years the people will have it? How does that math work?
Well, mostly on any game, you're looking at what's the install base going to be at your launch date of a particular thing. In this case, for Star Wars, I think they were on Shader 2. I'm trying to think what the term is. Like right now, we're on Shader 5, right, for our launch on stuff. But they were on a tech that was not that far, they were a very high-end game for their time. Right, they were very high end for their time, so it was a challenge for them because they go, we're going to do some cool visual stuff, right? We want the Star Wars universe to be super rich. We're going to do some really cool art. We just are. We're going to do some very cool art, but to do that, the trade-off is you better have some really good tech people, and you're still going to suffer because you're pushing the envelope, and you're pushing what the install base has. Right, so you needed a 3D card, and you needed to be at a particular shader level, which a lot of 3D cards couldn't do at the time.
Gotcha. Okay, and
remember how rudimentary the old 3D cards were too. They were, they're like 1,000th of the ones you're buying today, if that. They were awesome at the time, but they're nothing now too.
Yeah. And you did mention it, the new game experience. Now, what was game testing like, and how big were the budgets for game testing of MMOs in comparison with, for example, the development of an add-on?
Well, I wasn't there for MPE, right? So I wasn't there when they tested it. I don't really know. I mean, all game companies are kind of miserly about testing. Right, because it's a cost center. It's just another cost, right? And they're typically, somewhere around 10 years behind industry and practices because they don't like to pay for QA in the first place, so they're not getting the best and the brightest QA people. And I don't mean every game company. I just mean in general in the game business, it's an afterthought, not a forethought. If you go into real industry, software industry stuff, quite often there's a QA person for every coder. We're lucky if we have one QA person for every 10 people, right, who are coding. So, it's just night and day. But, the QA teams, if you're getting close to a release, for Galaxies, I want to say we probably had 15 to 20 people, on the QA team, and probably 60 people 60 people on the dev team.
Wow, that's not a lot considering the scope of that game and all the things that could be discovered.
The play testers, are kind of pay testers. Those guys, they pay us to test our game. That's who they are. My current job, we have, I have a 70-person company, right? 70 people. I have 5 of those internal people are QA, and we have 35 external QA people. So. Wow. So that's a lot for a game company, right? So, but it's still not enough. I can't get all the QA I want every day. I'm having to make choices about what are we going to really look at hard and what are we going to hope is okay right now. That's the nature of because it's not an inconsequential cost, right? It actually costs money to make software. Yeah. And the other part about game software versus all other software is, all of it's made by miracle. My theory right now, and has been for a while, is that every game that gets made is a miracle. Every game that actually ships is like a double miracle. And a game that ships and is successful is like a triple miracle. It's like the hat trick. Because when you go and say, so I've gone to, SEI training and these other software things, and they basically say, Hey, projects as big as you are making don't succeed, like 99% of the time. They just don't work because they're too big to be done. Right? Big software is not something you want to be doing because big software has a super high failure rate. And we make big software, right? And the online games make the biggest of big software. Mm-hmm. So it's all miraculous that it even works at all. And so that's the key is and it's done because people are putting in that extra effort. People, the passion that goes into game making makes the difference. Because if you're just paying people to code 8 hours a day, they would all cost 3 to 5 times more than they cost.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so we get very bright, motivated people, and that makes the difference between 5x and 1x.
Gotcha. Now, once you leave Sony, or you're asked to leave Sony, you end up, if I got this correct, back at EA.
Well, I left Sony, and Rich didn't get fired with me, but Rich left about 6 or 8 months later. So I'm out just doing consulting stuff and casting about, looking for the right thing to do. But what I really want to do is I want to start a company. And Rich, I knew Rich wasn't going to be far behind me because more than at least once I got asked to fire Rich. And I said, I'm not going to fire Rich. That's crazy. Rich actually makes things happen here. We can't have. You want somebody else fired? I can give you a list of people I want to fire that you won't let me fire. I'm not going to fire Rich. So I knew, they didn't like, Rich doesn't tell people what they want to hear. He tells them what he thinks, right? So, I knew Rich wasn't going to be long, and he knew he wasn't going to be long there either. He wanted to get a little more done. So, he got out, and then we started talking about, okay, what do we want to do? Who's the right person to go with to make the next MMO, like to make the next real serious MMO? And we had 3 companies in mind, right? We had Valve, of course, was on our list. BioWare was on our list. And who was the third one? They were all people who hadn't made an MMO yet, but certainly should be making an MMO, right? Like, wow, I can't remember who the third one was. But they were all like big kahunas, right? And so we go, okay, let's go approach these companies and see what's going on. So we go and talk to the Valve guys, and we realize immediately, if you've ever read about how Valve, manages internally, we go, wow, you can't do big software like that. You can't. We don't understand how we could make something that worked in that environment, and it totally works for what they're doing. But to make the kind of software we needed to make, we went, wow, we don't have any idea how we would make that happen. It would be something else. God, I wish I could remember who the third company was, because that's a good story too. But but with BioWare, we said, here's these guys are making great RPGs. They're making awesome RPGs, but they haven't made an online game, right? And they've got this story thing, multiplayer kind of, multi-threaded multiplayer kind of story thing down. And so Rich finds a way to set up a meeting with. I think we talked to Greg first, with Ray and Greg. But I think we talked to Greg first, and we said, look, you guys should be doing this. And they go, we're kind of in the middle of something, but that sounds like a good idea. So we started talking about it more. And then, they said, yeah, we really want to do this, but we're in the middle of being acquired. So we have to, we're going to try to make this part of that deal. And then we get involved in it, and, then they put us in front of John Riccatello, right, who happens to be, what's the name of that? What was the name of the venture company? It was a private equity company he was running, right? That had a bunch of money from Bono and some other people, and his own money, right? And he goes, "We're going to do a roll up, right? We're going to get BioWare, we're going to get these other guys, Pandemic, we're going to do some other stuff, and we're going to make a big game company. And we're going to go out and do something cool in the market." And our idea was, let's make a BioWare. And so our idea was make a BioWare MMO. We didn't know what it would be on. Star Wars was one of the ideas, right? The KOTOR thing was one of the ideas. But we also looked at Game of Thrones, believe it or not. And
oh wow,
they go, everybody's like, Game of Thrones, that's not big enough. Everybody said that. which just like, everybody who read it is going, no, totally, this is the game we ought to do. This is slow magic, high fantasy, low magic, kind of thing. It's super dark. It's going to be awesome, right? But nobody wanted to do that. We looked at a couple other IPs too. And then, started talking to Lucas and ended up going, okay, maybe this Lucas deal is going to work. It took about a year to do the deal with Lucas. So we're making the MMO, trying to make as much of it as we can without definitely committing to the, so finally they get bought, we get bought in to start BioWare Austin and start an MMO. And we've got a core team of professionals to start it. They send out, a couple of guys who know their stuff really well to run, the design and the writing. And we start to build the team. And we're going great guns. It's pretty cool. But we can't tell anybody what we're working on because we don't have the signed deal with Lucas, and hadn't been, even after it was signed, it wasn't announced for a long time. So we would interview people going, yeah, we're doing an MMO and we're doing it at BioWare and we can't tell you what it's about. And then if they took the job and walked in the door, the very first day when they walked in the door, they got to sign the LucasArts thing and go, oh, and by the way, we're working on the Star Wars thing. So that was about a year. The first year of hiring was a little bit slower than I would have liked, but it was still pretty fast because it was BioWare and an MMO.
And what was it like to teach the established BioWare writers and designers how to work in the MMO space?
It wasn't too bad. I mean, again, the lead designer is pretty smart. The guy we got, James is brilliant, not just pretty smart, he's brilliant. He's not a big fan of online, really, but the key was he got the medium, he understood what we needed to do to be successful, right? And he trusted us to do the other parts of it well. To try to get all that driven into building a game that would still have a great BioWare feel, but be in an online universe. That was the key. The thing that we liked about getting him in particular was he bought the culture. And one of our learnings, since we'd been, both Rich and I had been in multiple kind of remote studios, is that this time we were going to do it different. This time we were going to totally embrace whatever the core culture was and not try to differentiate it at all. Always we kind of had our own kind of culture that we would have separate from the core company, to try to fit the vibe of the, instead we said, no, we're going to totally embrace BioWare culture. We're not going to put up with anything that's not BioWare culture. And we're going to go up there quite often to make sure that we're on track, staying on the BioWare culture. So we actually tried to make BioWare Austin a clone of BioWare Edmonton. In that sense, from a cultural standpoint. Now, it didn't quite work, but it worked a lot better than any other place I've been.
How would you define BioWare culture?
Well, BioWare culture had a lot of great parts to it. I mean, Ray in particular had put a lot of thought into designing the culture. They had a series of things that they said, this is what our culture, here's what we live by, and I wish I had them here to pull them up. But, there were very clear statements of this is what we do, and it didn't, not what we don't do, this is what we do. And those things were clear and concise. And literally every meeting we ever had, every company meeting we ever had, he'd start by talking about that and he'd end by talking about that. He preached that thing night and day, and he lived it, was the most important part. So those guys actually did what they said they were going to do, which is, most culture is what actually happens. Not the thing that's written on the wall in the reception area, right? It's what actually happens is the culture. And those guys put a lot of conscious effort into making sure that what they said was what they did. And I really enjoyed working for those guys, and I learned a lot from them in that process.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so it was one of the best places I've ever worked because of that, because they were so conscious and deliberate about culture.
And you guys, you're actually there all the way through to the launch of Old Republic, correct?
I did not make it to launch. I made it almost to launch. That's an interesting story in itself. So, it was a long slog, right? It's a 7-year game, right? It's a long slog game. We are And of course, the longer a game is at EA, the more they want to raise the sales forecast, right? So literally, when we started the game, and Jesus, 2005 or six, right? And they go, "What's the forecast for this game?" I go, "We're going to do 2.2 to 2.4 million units out the door." That's what this game, this type, the game we're building, on the IP we're building it. There's no way we can't do 2.2 to 2.4 million units out the door. That and the online market, as I understood it, that it would be in the future. I go, that's where we're going to be, and Rich and I were in total consensus on this. And so, we're getting into like year 7 and year 6 and 7, and they're going, no, we need it to be 3 million units. And it's like, no matter what you say, we're going to do 2.2 to 2.4 million units out the door. The question is how many we're going to do after that because of how well it does. If it's really, really good, we're going to get a lot more units, but you're not going to get them in your launch month. You're just not, right? And they kept wanting to up that forecast because it costs more money. They kept, and some of the money that cost more we did, right? So we did an experiment maybe 2 or 3 years in, where like most BioWare games, if they have a voiceover, just the other characters talk, your character doesn't talk.
Yeah.
Right? And we did, and we go, wow, this it's working. Right? We had a prototype. I mean, we were doing testing from year 2 internally, right? Doing internal tissue testing from year 2 on it. But we did it. We went ahead and put together a test of what if your character talked, based on all your choices, right? And we did the A/B test on it, and we went ourselves, like we did it, right? And then we had other people, and then we went and got the data too. But when we did it, we went, oh shit, we have to make the character talk. Oh shit. And the reason we were going, oh shit, is it just literally raised the VO budget by 40%, more. Mm. So it was a lot, it's still got the Guinness World Book record for the most VO in a single game, right? It's
wow.
Too much VO. Millions and millions of dollars of VO. So, there's an expensive game, right? That's an expensive game. We spent easily $100 million on dev, maybe a little more. So the VO budget was several million, but, it's a rounding error next to the 100 million plus. So, but, it was a big game. It was like the big game. And we thought when we started, we go, we could maybe be the last big, subscription MMO. That's what we thought, right? We thought we might be able to get in here and not have to make it free to play. And we were kind of right about that for the beginning, but still, ESO came out after us and did the same thing, right? So, but we thought we might be the last because we knew the world was going free to play even when we started it.
Oh, really?
But to make a game with a license and all that stuff, and again, free to play, all the free to play stuff was not really in 2007 in the U.S. Free to play is not the thing, right? When you're starting it, and now it's 2011, and you're going, oh crap, what are we gonna, Yeah, we'd like to make it free to play. At one point, they said, why don't you make it free to play? And it's like literally, I got in a lot of trouble a bunch of times on BioWare with EA, but I was in an exec meeting and one of the lunatics said, hey, we should just give it away for free. And it's like, how are we going to make our money back? We got $100 million in this thing. We need to sell it at launch to make our money back. That's insane, right? I love the big, crazy, insane ideas, but, and I was very gentle about how I talked about it. I didn't say he was crazy, and I didn't even look at him like he was crazy. I just said, seems like, though, we can make a lot more money by even if we make it free to play, 3 months out or 7 months, 6 months out or 9 months out, we'd make we'd recover our costs a lot faster if we bought it out, even if we didn't do the same volume of units, right? Because all those free to play people aren't going to convert to subscription either, right? They're just going to come in, try it, and go out because no investment. They don't invest as much themselves in it. But anyway, I got in trouble after that board. It wasn't a board meeting, but it was a high-level exec meeting at EA at Redwood Shores. My boss, Ray and Greg, yelled at me for doing that. So, and probably rightly so, because it's hard for me to hear stupid shit and not say something. It's a problem. So, or at least stupid to me. And maybe I'm stupid, right? But if it sounds stupid to me, I'm going to say something about it. So yeah, that was interesting. I also got so. Here we are, we're a year out from launch, right? So we're a year out from launch, and all of a sudden they come in. We built a central service for it, right? We have an integrated central service website game. So our website, our game are tightly integrated, and our central service is tightly integrated with those things. We have it all working, right? We built the right teams to do that. We spent the money. We've got it all ready to go. And they come in and they go, by the way, we're doing this Origin thing, which was like for the 5th time internally that they were trying to get. It wasn't called Origin then, but it was like the EA. We want EA Steam. It's EA Steam, right? We want to make an EA Steam thing, and of course it wasn't Steam. It was pitiful, right? And behind schedule and whatever. And they said, oh, by the way, you've got to convert your game to run on this because we're not going to let you run on your own service. You're going to have to run on and you're going to be not only do you have to convert to run on it, you're going to be the launch title for it.
Oh, Jesus.
And we looked at it. We went, wow, this is like severely underfeatured for what we already have, right? But our thing wasn't set up to be like for every game, right? It was set up to be for our game. And they didn't want it anyway because they had a bunch of people who were spending money over at Redwood Shores on it. But they said, no, it's a corporate decision. And I get it. I got it, right? So they said, basically, they're saying, for the good of the company, we need to build this thing. You're just one of the pieces of fodder to build it, right? To do it. And so we had to kind of can what we were doing and start doing the transition to that thing. And which, of course, upset all our plans because for us, that was already handled, right? It was like, that's in the rear view mirror. That's not the thing I'm worried about. I'm worried about, getting the damn game shipped, not worried about the infrastructure stuff. So now I'm worried about the infrastructure stuff too. And, there's a lot of friction around this because literally they're not delivering stuff. They're not delivering it on time. And of course, I'm not a shrinking violet. I will get into fisticuffs with anybody, anytime, particularly when they don't have any integrity about doing what they said they were going to do. So I'm causing a lot of damage, but that's basically getting to exec. Gordon's not a team player. Yeah, I'm not a team player. I'm trying to get my fucking game shipped. You be a team player and get a game shipped. I want to see it happen. I'm playing for my team. You're right. I'm playing for the team to get this game shipped so the company can make some money. And so. And of course we're late. All games are late, right? But we're late, and some of our past sins always come up to haunt you when you're making a game. You make choices early on, like we used an engine that and the reason we used that engine is so we could be demonstrable very early. We could show the game, because if you don't use an engine, guess what? You spend the first year and a half building an engine and have nothing to show. And in EA, when you have nothing to show, guess what happens to your game?
It's canned.
And the monthly you're showing it to the execs, and the monthly you go in the execs and you say, I have nothing to show you except for some charts about the thing that we're building, right? There's no pixels on the screen. There's no pretty pictures. There's no characters walking around. So we bought an engine, and we said, we know this engine is not right for us, but we're going to have to change the engines while we're flying. We're going to rebuild everything of it while we're doing it. And we did rebuild a bunch of it, but of course all that takes longer than you think and costs more and takes longer. So we're running behind, and finally they're all over us, right? The EA exec is all over us. You guys, you're spending all this money. We don't have our game. Yada yada yada. You're telling us we can't sell 3 million units. You guys suck, right? And they're really on Ray and Greg's case, right? They're gunning for him. So. Ray and Greg are Greg's pretty easygoing. Ray's a player, right? Ray wants to win. He wants to win every game he's in. So, they were gunning for them. They were literally trying to set those guys up at some level. There's a lot of corporate, in the corporate kind of VP and above level, there's a lot of politics and sharpness that goes on. And those guys had never worked for anybody like this, right? They'd never been in a big company. They had no idea what they were in. Later, actually, I don't remember whether it was Ray or Greg came to me and said, all that stuff you told us when EA acquired us, that we told you was bullshit, it's all true, and now we know that, right? They finally, because Rich and I are going like, we know how EA works, right? And here's what's going to, here's how this all is going to go down over the next 5 years while we're building this game, right? And here's what we should be doing to protect ourselves going into this thing. So, but they're really honest, right? They're really, and I go, look, and at the time I had like a back problem. I had a ruptured disc, and man, I was messed up. That's chronic pain and all that stuff. It was bullshit. But I wasn't feeling it, right? I'm getting beat up every day at work by not by my bosses. They were with me. I mean, Ray and Greg are stand-up guys. They were standing with us. But I was getting beat up by EA every day on do it this way, do it that way. And I go, look, I'm not having any fun. Here's what I should do. I should quit. You guys blame everything on me, and you'll get another year. Blame everything that's wrong with the game on me. I'm the scapegoat. Awesome, right? I'm gone. I'm good with it. And I'm good with you doing it. Just blame everything on me, and you'll buy yourself a whole nother year to get the damn game done that you want to get done. Right? So, they dumped Mythic on us, right? They were doing all kinds of, and the EA execs, they love playing the Warhammer game, that Mythic did that failed.
Oh yeah.
They love that game. They love the PvP in that game for some reason. So they gave us all the Mythic guys because these guys know how to do PvP. You should have them do all your PvP.
Oh jeez.
So they literally moved the whole Mythic studio in with us to do part of the game, and about a year and a half before launch, right? We got to the point where we go, look, we can either do PvP, or we can do some really great raids and dungeon stuff for PvE. If we try to do both, we're going to end up with kind of sad on both sides. And they said, no, we got to have both. Okay, so they did both, and it was sad on both sides, right? It wasn't, the PvP wasn't what it needed to be, and and they had like two things, two raid kind of things at launch, right? Not enough stuff. So, so I quit, and with notice and all that stuff, and just said, I'm out. Before they were going to fire me, they were going to have to fire me. Ray and Greg were going to be forced to fire me eventually. They'd already come in and brought some guys in and fired my head tech guy, a few months before that. Snaked some guys in and fired him. And so I knew I was on the hit list. It was just a matter of time. Because I wasn't doing it the EA way, right? We were doing it the way that we knew how to do it. And Rich, again, stayed till it shipped and then left, right? But that's the Star Wars, Old Republic story. It was a great team to work on. We built that team from scratch. We tried to be as BioWare as we could possibly be down in Austin, and I learned so much from those guys, who ran BioWare. Very, very smart, but not street smart enough. In the end, right, they both got pushed out too, right? Because that's just the way it was going to work. Right, you either have to win or die, and that it is that type of game where you either win or you die in that arena. So, so that was the challenge, right? Ray really wanted to take his boss's job. He was just too overt about it, and they figured that out and got him before he got them.
Wow.
So, yeah, but big company politics are like that. That's why I like smaller companies and staying focused on the projects, right? Because in the end, what is it all really about? It's really about what are you delivering and what are people doing with it, right? What does the people do with it that matters? So I'm glad to have been a big part of Star Wars Galaxies, the Old Republic, both of them actually, but Star Wars, the Old Republic. I negotiated the deal for, with Lucas for that. Actually, way back at Kesmai, I negotiated the deal with AOL that was good enough for us to be able to win this, win a contest with them. So, but that came from that time at GameTech, right, where I spent so much time with lawyers learning contract stuff to make sure that stuff didn't get in my contracts that would screw me later.
and very, very valuable lessons, apparently. But I have a question. How did you negotiate a deal for a second Star Wars MMO that was running at the same time as Galaxies?
Well, part of the deal was that we got him to kill. We got him to kill Star Wars Galaxies when we launched.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So when you
well, remember, every deal with those guys has a termination on it, and remember, Lucas calls the shots. Nobody else calls the shots. Lucas calls the shots. So they've always got outs in there for what they want to do, and those things. Once you get past your initial term, are renewing, and they can always say no renewal on a contract. So you're always you're always their bitch. Everybody who's a licensor, you're their bitch for sure. Unless they're small and you have more money than they need it. So, but if it's Lucas, they're not small and they don't need your money. They can find somebody else to give them that money.
Gotcha.
So, and also another interesting story about that is the way that we wrote the deal with Lucas is that nobody could do an MMORPG. So I don't know if you remember Clone Wars from Sony, but they had to take out all the RPG elements, which really made it kind of a shit game. Because we had exclusive rights to do that, and when we noticed it, we said, "Hey, they can't do that. We have the exclusive for that. You got to fix that, Lucas." We didn't even talk to Sony. We told Lucas to fix it.
Oh wow, really?
Yeah. Well, it's all about how you write the contracts, isn't it?
Yeah. Always. Very smart. And
like I say, I'm a paralegal almost now. Almost.
And when you say that you guys saw it or you guys made them do it, how did you become aware of those elements? Were you just basically reading news reports, playing demos at conventions?
We play the games too, but the key was, and also the whole game development thing's a community, right? So there's the above board communication and below board communication. Like everybody knows what everybody's doing all the time. Right. It's just that's the way it is. Right. So, we're all working for the man, but everybody still, we know we're going to be working with each other again someday anyway, somewhere.
Gotcha. Okay. So you're out of BioWare.
Yep.
And what do you do next?
Well, I started looking around and I looked RAF has just gotten acquired by RAF's company, Metaplace, just got acquired by what was their name? So they became Disney, right? They Playdom. So Playdom had acquired them. Then Playdom was acquired by Disney, and they go, "We're going to make a bazillion of these, social games." But I had an idea that you could make a social MMO. That you could actually make an MMO on the social platform.
Okay.
That would be cool. And so I pitched that to, Raph says, let me introduce you to the guys. They introduced me to them. I said, we should really do like a little MMO in social, right? All these people, it's almost like, in the evolution of games, first you do arcade games, right? And then you kind of move up into other games, shooters and RPGs and everything else. And eventually you get to online. On every platform, you kind of go from simple games to more complex games and the end state is you're doing an online game, right? With a multiplayer online game. So why don't we do that? Why don't we make an MMO? On this platform, the platform's very rudimentary, right? But we know how to do the back end part. It's already online. It just isn't super multiplayer. Let's make it real. It's kind of turn-based multiplayer and asynchronous multiplayer. Can we make something that's both synchronous and asynchronous multiplayer that's a MMO? Maybe so. So pitched that, and we started making it, and they said, well, there was a bunch of crazy shit that went on there too, right? They brought me in, and they go, the first thing my new boss came to me and said, hey, this League of Legends thing? We should make a League of Legends thing on social. And I go, I haven't played it. Let me go play it and look at it. And so I go play it and I look at it. And I go, wow, these guys are the best guys in the world doing this first, right? So they're the number one guys doing this. They're the best in the world. They had the best game of that type in the world, period, in the story. And I go, okay, so I built a team to make a MMORPG on social, and you want me to now go make this MOBA, right, on social, which is going to be damn hard to start with. I go, it's not the right thing for the team I built, right? It's just not. It's a mission that we'll fail at. We'll fail at that mission if we do it. So I don't want that mission, right? I don't want a mission that I'm almost doomed to fail on. You know, I like a hard mission, but I don't like a mission where you go, oh yeah, you have 3 bullets and 100 enemies. Okay, go win. Well, maybe that might be hard. That might be more than hard. It might be impossible. So I turned that down, and then they came to me with another thing when they go, you know, we're Disney. We have all this stuff, right? We want to make the theme park online thing. We want to make every Disney theme park online in a social game. And you've got a lot of licensing experience. You've got a lot of this, a lot of that. And I go, wow, that sounds really hard. That sounds even harder than the first thing you told me to do. Because, you know, I couldn't imagine, you know, like, and they didn't mean just like the normal Disney properties. They meant everything, you know, everything they owned, right? And they actually did get somebody to go and make that game later, try to make that game later. And of course, they massively failed doing it. It was, you know, they did a lot of cool stuff. I mean, I'm sad it never made it to market because it was actually really cool. But, you know, their reach exceeded their grasp, right? You couldn't quite get there with the tech and with all the roadblocks of trying to get all those IPs to work together. So, but, you know, they kept coming to me with, hey, let's do something big. And what I said is, look, I need to run one of these games live. So give me one of the live games to run, and I'll use the tech from these guys from Raph's team. I'll use that tech to build the game. And we put together a prototype, and the prototype was damn fun. Everybody who played the prototype loved it. So we started building it, and literally we squeezed the fun out of it as we were building the game. Strangely enough, like the more we made it, you know, into what it needed to be, the less fun it was as we moved forward. So we were struggling in that sense with it, you know, and it got to the point where I go, you know, we should kill this because it's not fun. We should do something else, right? So let's do something else than this thing because the idea that we had, the prototype was fine, but the game is not, right? The game is not working the way that we want it to work. And if you can show me how to make it work, I'd love to have that teaching, but it wouldn't. And these are small teams, right? We had maybe 15, 20 people working on it. So I call that small, but you know, that's small for me. But about this time, of course, Playdom gets in trouble, doesn't have enough money, yada, yada, yada. We got to cut back. Let's cut back. And so, you know, I go, okay, I get it. You know, I should go right away. My second in command there ran the team for a while. They worked on some stuff, but again, nothing ever came to out.
Gotcha.
Really. We did get to run one of the online games, but that was fun to see how this light audience. So for me, it's always about audience, right? And I enjoyed working with kind of the more casual, much more casual audience that social was garnering, right? Social people were garnering. And I got to look at a whole bunch of games that they were building along the way, too, which was great. It was a short gig. It was a 2-year gig. Overall, and you know, go, you know, they immediately come in, they double the size of the company in the first, you know, 6 months, and you know, a year and 3 quarters later, they're having to cut it in half again. You know, same old. But you know, everybody's learning, right? Because you know, the social thing, there's not like a deep well here of people with a lot of experience, and even the deep well experienced people have had to evolve quite a bit because it's a new medium at some level. So I enjoyed that part. I enjoyed the part, and you know, being exposed to the metrics part that they were doing, because they literally metrics everything. And you know, you get to the point where you go, "Wow, every click the player does is an opportunity to exit," is what you think. Because if you watch the progression of the player on every click that they can do, some of them are dropping out. So, and yes, that's been happening with all the games we ever made before. But we never saw it. So now you're like staring at it going, oh my God. Our games suck. We need to be better than this, right? We need to make them want to make the next click and it makes you put more fun in the game every moment, right? To make it work. So the learning there was fabulous, and again, I got to work with some great people. So no harm, no foul on the Disney thing. I understand why Disney can't do software though, because their culture is the service culture of both doing movies. So they have a good movie culture and they have a good theme park culture, but software's different, right? And they can't quite get their arms around the software.
What would you say is different about software from the other entertainment media?
I think it's probably a combination of the agility of it and the discovery parts of it. I mean, Disney is an old company, right? They're not a spring chicken, right? They've been around a while, and they got a playbook for everything, which means that they have a checklist. You do it this way and you succeed. You do it this way and you succeed. And software just isn't like that. And even if you had a checklist, it wouldn't always work. So, I got a checklist in my head, but I know it doesn't always work. I know I'm going to have to change it.
Gotcha. And so where do you go after Disney?
Well, after Disney, it's like, okay. And I'll go back to when we started BioWare. So, before BioWare, here's the three companies that we want to do business with, and none of them are ready to do it, right? Other than BioWare. And the fourth choice was to start a game company and go raise money for it. So I had a small business plan for that, and my business plan back then was, given that we would have very limited resources, I thought we should do basically the RuneScape route, right? We should do a web-based games, and we should raise enough money to do 10 of them, and all 10 of them had to be one of two things. They either had to have a new game mechanic that isn't in other games, right? Or they had to be a serious twist on a current thing. Not if it wasn't game mechanic, it had to be some kind of fusion or twist that was unique so that the game would actually stand out. And that we should start 10 of them and hope that 2 or 3 of them would work in the market. Mm-hmm. Literally do minimum viable product and put them out on the internet and just start to see what traction you got. Because that was my thing for, how are we going to move the medium forward? How are we going to, and, one of the problems that we have with the games that we have is they take so long to do that your iteration is low, right? You're not learning because you're not iterating fast enough. So I wanted to find a way to do super iteration, and that was my thought at the time of how to do much faster iteration and get in front of customers to learn from them. So coming out of Disney, I'm going, wow, I just need to start a company because I'm not really employable anymore. I know too much. Most of the people I know that I could go work for, I know how the job's going to end, so I don't even want to start. Because if I already know how it ends, I'm not interested. The journey's not as interesting.
True.
So I was starting to build a plan, and Todd Coleman, who was running King's Isle here for a long time, and before he did Shadowbane, so I'd known him since Shadowbane days, right? He's a game dev here in Austin. He and I would have lunch every once in a while just to chat and do talk about employees and shoot the shit about what's going on in the market. And literally at BioWare, they were across the parking lot in another building King's Isle was. So literally we had a parking lot between us there, right? And he had 200 people and I had 500 people at BioWare. So, and he'd worked there for 7 or 8 years. And he did Wizard 101, right? Which was a little game. And before he did it, before he even found the first investor, he had shown me the game. He'd shown me what he planned to do. And he goes, look, we can do this game and we can be super profitable with 100,000 people, right? I'm not going to spend a bunch of money making this game. I've scoped it down to be super small. It's going to be, it's for this kid audience. And that, Disney has their Toontown out and that kind of works. And this is so much cooler than Toontown. And I said, wow, that's a crazy idea. But of course, when he was doing Shadowbane, I thought, wow, that's a crazy idea. And so I know Todd's the guy with the crazy ideas that end up working. So he said, let's have lunch. And I said, great. And we were having lunch, and he said, and he was going to tell me he was leaving. But before he could, I said, I'm leaving Disney, and I'm going to start a new company. And he said, shit, I invited you to lunch to tell you I'm leaving Kings Island. I'm going to start a new company. And we had a few coffee meetings after that, and then pretty soon our two companies were one company.
Wow. Okay.
So and then we went to raise money, and the only way to raise money was for mobile. So we raised money for a mobile game, and we built a little mobile game. And every month we were building the mobile game, it cost more to acquire mobile customers, right? The cost of acquisition was going up month by month while we're building this game. And by the time we got the game to where it's time to test it, we go, wow, it's going to cost more to test the game to find out if it's any good than we spent to build it and user acquisition. And we know the game is not, we play the game and we know that there's some stuff with the game, but we need the user acquisition, we need to run users to it to see what it's going to do, which I learned at Disney, right? We did a lot of testing, like in the Philippines and other places where we do little tests to see how people would get through the funnel, right? We buy people and have them go through and see what happened. So we said, hey, we've now bet the entire company on this game, and we actually don't have the money to do that, but we have enough money to go build a Kickstarter for an MMO. So let's use the last of our money, throw the dice, and build a prototype and get to a Kickstarter for an MMO. Now, a lot of people were doing Kickstarters with no prototype. Mm. But when I analyzed the market, both Todd and I, we analyzed all the successful, unsuccessful games, and what we saw was a trend toward if you didn't have a prototype footage, you weren't going to get funded, most likely, right? So we literally did a checklist of what games got funded for what reasons, and we didn't know all the reasons, but we knew all the commonalities, right? Here's all the common elements of things to get funded. Here's the common elements of things that don't get funded. Let's not do any of that list, and let's do as much of this other list as we can. So we built a prototype, and we put out and of course Todd had done Shadowbane, and Shadowbane was down at that time. It just came out the other day. The guys who owned it in China bought it back out. But he knew what the fatal flaw of Shadowbane was. Like, okay, I understand how I screwed up Shadowbane and what was wrong with it long term. So I'm going to fix that in this next game. We're going to do a very hardcore PvP game, and which we could do because we did a non-PvP game. But guess what? Where all the money goes in a MMO, a lot of it goes to that PvE content. Like 40 to 50% of the money goes to the PvE content. So you can't make a full-blown kind of AAA MMO for today for less than $40 or $50 million. And we said maybe we can make one for a lot less if we don't do the PvE stuff. So that was our pitch. And it turns out the pitch worked. We got funded, right? And from that funding, we were able to then raise more money, more capital. And we did that multiple times over, to get to the point where we are, where we're close to shipping Crowfall finally. Almost 6 years later. Jesus. Wow. They all take a long time. And when you don't know how much money you're going to have to do it, they actually take a little longer. Like if you knew how much money you had to do it, then you would say, oh, I'll efficiently spend that money to get there. If you don't know how much money you're going to do, you're always trying to get to, we'll get to here, and if we have to ship it, we'll ship it. But if we don't, now we got to, now we did some stuff we shouldn't have done if we were going to not ship it then. So yeah, it's been interesting. I don't know I would do it again. I wouldn't do this again. It's amazing that, again, multiple miracles line up to make it happen.
Well, and what percentage of the development money actually came from the crowdfunding?
Well, in the end, it's actually on the website here. I can just look it up. So we got like 1.7 coming out of Kickstarter.
Okay.
So that's nowhere near enough to do an MMO. The second question in our FAQ on Kickstarter was, how the hell are you going to do an MMO for $800,000 or whatever we said we were going to raise, right? And we said we aren't. We have some money. We've already spent a bunch of money. We spent a bunch of money to build what we had, and we're going to raise more money to do it, but we're not going to, what you guys are doing are letting us do that. By showing that there's a market, now we can raise money against it. So we've actually raised, let me get this right. So pre-sales, including the 1.7 that we got from Kickstarter, are right now at $6.4 million. So we raised 6.4 from customers. They bought our game before there was a game, right? And we've actually raised an equity about 32.
Oh, okay.
So, like 5 times that.
That's good. And
right.
When you were making your decisions here about this game, about how to generate money to keep the servers on, basically, did you just say, okay, we're doing traditional free-to-play? Are we doing more, since it's PvP centric, is it going to be more along the lines of a Fortnite where you're going to be generating money from the sale of non-influencing tokens and stuff? What exactly is the finance model?
If you don't know what your business model is when you start your game, you're messing up because you're going to screw it up. Well, the first thing is, because we did it on Kickstarter, it was impossible to do free-to-play. Free-to-play games don't get Kickstarted. Why would you give money to someone to build a game that you're going to be able to play for free? It makes no sense, right? They have to be buy-to-play. So we embraced the buy-to-play, buy once, play forever model, the old Guild War model. Not the new Guild War model, the old Guild War model. And in fact, when Guild Wars 1 came out, it upset the apple cart, right? It literally... So everybody who was doing games then, who were selling their games and then doing a subscription, what Guild Wars said is, hey, I'm going to sell your game and you can just play it forever. And we went, you're polluting our market. You stole the march on us, right? You screwed us up, right? So they upset the marketplace by using that model back then. Yeah. Eventually they figured out, oh, yeah, you need to make money over the longer term. You can't just play the Diablo thing when you're making a massively multiplayer game versus you're making a kind of low-level multiplayer game. Blizzard can do it, but you can't do it. Sorry. So they figured that out, and that's why their business model has evolved. So from the very beginning, even on our Kickstarter, we said, look, we're going to sell you the game, and you can play it forever. Then we will have a VIP subscription that'll have cool stuff in it that you might want. And some people will want it, and some people won't. That's fine. It's not required to play the full game. You can play the full game. And then the third thing is, and we'll sell cosmetics. We won't sell anything that will give you any power, but we'll sell cosmetics because our game is about competition. We must have a level playing field, right? We can't. Yeah. If we're not going to have a level playing field, we should have made this game in Asia. That's what that was. And that was our market opening. So our market opening, when we analyzed the market, was at the time when we were doing this, right back in 2015, we're looking at the market and going, oh, what are MMO players saying? They're saying they hate the Asian pay-to-win MMOs. They love playing them, but they hate the fact that somebody with $100 does better than them. They hate that. And every game that says they're not going to do that does it in 3 months after it launches, right? So they constantly break their word. So now MMO players don't trust any game company because of that, right? Because they're always going to be squeezing them for an extra dollar or breaking their promises about what the game's going to be about. So we said that's a market opening. And that's what we needed, aggravated, pissed off customers to fund our Kickstarter, frankly. Right?
Okay.
So yeah, that's how, you always have to find the disaffected minority to be your true believers.
Very cool, very cool. And so when are you, do you have a fixed launch date yet, or is it still a little vague?
We've never had a fixed launch date, but we are approaching launch finally.
Okay.
I mean, the nice thing about being independent like us is that we don't have to, just come up with a date and then arbitrarily hit it or miss it or arbitrarily miss it. Look at all the big companies that miss their arbitrarily said launch dates. We always said, let's get the game right before we ship it. Now, we may not be able to get it as right as we want it by the time we ship it, but as long as we have the money to keep running, we're trying to get the game into the right place to do it, right? So Like way back in the day when we launched Harpoon for the very first time, the company was literally out of money, right?
Mm.
That launch date was pretty set in stone because the company was out of money. If we hadn't launched it, on December 17th, 1989, we wouldn't have gotten it paid on January 1st, 1990.
Gotcha.
That kind of, so a lot of games get launched because of financial pressures, right? Because they go, wait, we're out of time. You're out of time. They rip it away from you and stick it in a box and ship it back in the old days, right? So now they rip it away from you, put it on the internet and ship it. So, but we've tried to, we're trying to make sure that we hit the right quality level at launch because we know how important launch is.
Yeah.
Launch is when people make up their minds about you.
Gotcha. Now, we've talked about a lot of things. I don't want to eat up too much of your time, but I have 2 questions left.
No worries.
One is actually calling back to the interview you did with Warren Spector that we talked about at the very beginning in our last session. And one of the things that you said there, and this was 2004, you were talking about the MMO space and online gaming as a whole, and you said that the rules aren't written yet. And you were referring, I think, to the gameplay mechanics, the financing mechanics, all of that stuff. Do you think that statement still stands? Do you think it's still in flux?
I don't think all the rules are written yet. So that's what I meant, right? So we don't really know everything, right? We don't really know everything about big audiences, for example, right? We don't really know how to move the herd well, or, how to please the herd well all the time, right? So we're still learning in that sense. And that's, I think, what I love the most about the medium, right, is it's so dynamic. And we can't and don't know everything, right? Whereas in the packaged goods business, you can get to where you can fool yourself into thinking you know almost everything, right? Like you can reduce the number of variables to parameters where you can understand the system. Whereas this system is too big and complex really for us to fully grasp it and understand it. And the players in mass are not understandable either, really, really completely. Yeah, I mean, we can kind of guess trends and stuff and say, and segment and figure out, this segment is kind of like this and kind of like that. But, they're all individuals too. Yeah, we segment them, but they're all individuals. And we're trying to, get something in we're trying to get something in a lot of different people's heads who see things very differently, but we want them to see our stuff all the same, or, which never works. Which is why I think the best games, can be interpreted by different people differently.
Gotcha. Very good. And my final question, and I asked this of all of my interview subjects. Looking back at your career, can you name one trend or development in the industry that hit really big that you did not see coming? And one trend or development that you thought was going to be really big that just didn't end up going anywhere or fizzled out?
Wow. All that would have been much earlier because now I don't even try. It's been years since I tried to predict the future beyond, 2 or 3 years out because it's a fool's errand, big time. And so when I got to Kesmai, I knew that online was going to be big. And I was right about that. But like stuff I was super wrong about, well, I started out making, when the modern computers came in, I chose Mac over everything else, right? So I'd made games on very rudimentary computers. And I chose Mac because I go, wow, Mac is like 10 times better than PC, easily. But guess what? Like 20 times more people buy PCs than buy Macs. There you go. So definitely was wrong about that, way back in the day. I'm one of those people who had a Lisa. I bought a Lisa rather than a car one time. So.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, because I knew it was revolutionary technology, right? It was revolutionary. And what I was right about is, everybody was going to use their computer like I was using a Lisa in 83 or in 82 and a Mac in 84, right? So
Yeah.
I was right about that, but I wasn't right that it was going to be a Mac. It wasn't a Mac, and it wasn't a Mac. So, I think that, a lot of us, we always have ideas about what's going to happen, but the truth is none of us really know. And the longer you're around, the more you realize predicting the future is mostly a fool's errand, unless you can figure out a way to make money from doing it, which futurists do. But, and there's very little penalty for being wrong too, right?
That's very true. Very true.
I don't know. I mean, I look at a lot of the stuff that's come along and like I was pretty certain that the VR thing wouldn't be that big. So far, it's not that big. But the thing about the current VR AR thing, so this is like, for me, the fourth time that wave came up on the beach. It's like the fourth wave of VR I've seen in my career.
Yeah.
This one didn't go all the way back to the ocean. There's still water on the beach, right? So this is, it actually got some traction. It's not mainstream. It's not even close to mainstream. It's not big enough to make software for. If you're an install-based kind of guy, which I am. One of the lessons you learn from the Mac PC thing is, I'm thinking about the years I was carrying both a Mac portable and a PC portable in my bag because I wouldn't give up my Mac.
Oh wow!
And eventually I gave up my Mac. So because I went, okay, I've turned to the dark side. I'm going to be a PC guy from now on. But this time the wave watched up, and so the next wave of VR may stick for good, right? May actually get rid of the beach completely, and it'll be part of the ocean. But
gotcha.
I was pretty sure about that, mostly because even myself, I can't do VR because it's still not good enough for me. I still get motion sick, right? Mm-hmm. And until it can do that for everybody, it's pretty hard to understand how it's going to get there. And the other thing is, my partner says, his wife goes, "You look stupid with that on your head," and if you think, if people think you look stupid with it on your head, that's going to kind of limit its exposure to it, right? So
gotcha.
It's not mainstream yet. And, in the end, we're in kind of the mainstream entertainment business, right? I started out in the hobbyist entertainment business. Now I'm in the mainstream entertainment business, right? And when you're in the mainstream, you got to kind of embrace, okay, what's mainstream? What can I make accessible to everybody?
Gotcha. Perfect answer. Gordon, this has been insightful, it has been informative, and it has been entertaining. I can't thank you very enough for your time on this.
Thank you, Carl. And, thanks for staying up. And I know you're tired, so go get some rest.
It's only 1:30 in the morning. Big deal.
I hope you've enjoyed another Video Game Newsroom Time Machine interview. You can leave us comments on Twitter, Instagram, and if you like what we're doing here, drop us a couple of bucks on Patreon. All the links are in the description below.